To everyone in the chamber, we're going to be starting just a couple minutes late this morning. My apologies for the delay, but we'll get started very soon. Thank you. Hey, Jody, Emily, is there a materials board, a physical one?
Yes, we didn't, we put them away because of the open house yesterday and then put them somewhere we forgot about.
Okay. Morning.
Recording in progress.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Palo Alto Architectural Review Board meeting for Thursday, September 19th, 2024. We are in the council chambers in Palo Alto, and we are starting just a few minutes late this morning. My apologies. We would like to have a call to order. Roll call, please.
Chair Rosenberg,
Present.
Vice Chair Chen. Present. Board Member Bolte,
Present.
Board Member Adcock,
Present.
Board Member Hirsch.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, we open the floor to public comment. This is if you have something you'd like to speak on that is not on the agendized items. So if you have anything you'd like to speak on, not on the agendized items, you may have 3 minutes to speak. Monica, do we have any raised hands or anyone on the public speaker cards?
I have no requests to speak.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to agenda changes, additions, and deletions. Jody, I turn it over to you.
No changes at this time.
Okay, perfect. Now we'll move on to city official reports. Also, Jody.
Yes, so good morning. My name is Jody Gerhart, Manager of Current Planning. We have Emily Callis with us today, who's going to present her project. We also have our new Assistant Director, Jennifer Armour. So just
Welcome,
wanted
Jennifer.
to officially introduce her. So as far as the city official report, did just want to explain that we have about 10 builders remedy projects. Those are on 8 different sites. Most of those are noted in the packet here. I did want to go over, and I can update this for next time, but if you take a look at your packet, page 7, there is 660 University. Packet page 7, please, Veronica, at the top. 660 University was originally, and still is, a major ARB and a zoning change, but they have also filed a builder's remedy project, so we can put that note there. On the next page, we have 3150. Again, they have 3 different versions of their project. One of those is a builder's remedy project. And then when you go down to page 9, we have 156 California is a builder's remedy. The next page is 762 San Antonio's builder remedy. So most of these do say builder's remedy in that left-hand column. You also have 3781 El Camino's builder's remedy. The next page, packet page 11, 3606 El Camino's builder's remedy, and 3400 El Camino is builder's remedy. So we also have 2 projects that have turned in SB 330s, meaning they have, frozen the standards for 6 months, and they have the possibility of still filing a builder's remedy. Now, this builder's remedy is, the law around that has not been tried in many courts, and so the attorneys are working with City Council to see how we react to all of these individual applications. And there could be some different reactions depending on the timing that they came in and things like that, because we do have our housing element that was adopted by council April 15th of this year, and then also certified by the state August 20th. So we, staff and the attorneys are working through that process right now. That is, I don't believe we have any newer projects. So that's the main official report at this point. Unless there's any vacations or anything like that coming up that you need to let us know, please do so. Thank you.
And looking ahead to the winter months here, does anyone have anything that they can anticipate in terms of travel time on the board? Okay, nothing at this time. We'll circle back later, of course. All right, at this point, we will move on to action item. It's item number 2 on the list. It's 4335 to 4345 El Camino Real. Request for streamlined housing development review to allow the development of a 29 3-story attached residential townhome condominium units and associated site improvements on 2 non-contiguous lots. Project would replace existing commercial and motel uses. The project includes 4 units at below market rate and accordingly requests waivers and concessions pursuant to the state density bonus laws. A compliant State Bill 330 pre-application was submitted January 24th, 2024. And we will turn this over to Emily for first of all, we'd like to go over disclosures. So does anyone on the board have a disclosure they'd like to make?
I'd like to disclose that I visited the site yesterday.
Visited the site also, not yesterday, day before.
I visited the site as well this week, and we did also receive 2 letters in regards to this project via email just the other day, so.
I disclosed I wasn't able to visit the site in person this time, but I passed the site frequently, and also I did the Google Street View this time.
I visited the site as well and received the 2 emails about it. And one clarification question, the second email had is noted an attachment, but that was not received. Just like a map or something that was,
Was that the hyperlink in the email?
yes.
Okay, yeah, I didn't get that open either.
The hyperlink just took us to the planning page, but the attachment said there was an annotation of a line and a circle or something, which I couldn't
we'll-
find it.
We'll circle back with Veronica on that. make
Yeah,
sure that we
I
have
don't
that
think we're
information.
understanding at this point, so
Yeah, we'll circle back on that, but we just wanted to make sure that the forwarded emails and notations from the public was complete and that there was a hyperlink that sort of just didn't really go anywhere significant. And I'm not recalling the attachment, but we'll circle back.
Yeah,
and make
there
sure
was
that
no
they were
attachment,
complete.
but the email said there was something attached.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, and we'll turn it over to Miss Emily Callis for her presentation.
Hi, good morning. My name is Emily Callis. I'm the project planner for this streamlined housing development project at 4445 El Camino Real. So this is a streamlined housing, going through the streamlined housing entitlement process. This means that it qualifies as a housing development project per the state definition. And as long as it meets the objective design standards, which are adopted as a part of Palo Alto Municipal Code, Chapter 18.24, it goes through the necessary CEQA review, and this is the one ARB study session to receive feedback to help the plans with the waivers that are requested to meet, the intent of the objective standards. After this, it is approved as a director's decision. So in terms of the process up until this point, the formal application was submitted in May 2024. It has since gone through 2 rounds of staff review, and a third one is anticipated based on the comments received. And we're at the ARB study session, and public comments are accepted at public hearings at any time throughout this process. This project is located on 2 parcels at the intersection of Cesano Court and El Camino Real. Both properties are in the CS Service Commercial Zoning District. The property is essentially at the city boundary with the city of Mountain View and the town of Los Altos. And the neighborhood contains other 2 to 5 story multifamily and hotel buildings. One item I wanted to point out while we are looking at the vicinity map is where there are trees kind of shown at the rear portion of the 4345 property. Let's see if you can see my cursor. The larger property. There are 2 pockets of trees which are considered common open space for the condominiums that are across Cesano Court here. And so these 2 pockets of this are not part of this property, which will be more clear on the site plan. The proposed project includes demolition of the existing commercial and hotel buildings and construction of 29 condominium units, which each have 2-car garages. 8 of these units are on the smaller property and 21 are on the larger side. Each unit has 3 to 4 bedrooms. 4 of the proposed units will be provided at below market rates, plus a 0.35 unit will be paid in lieu fees. And this is a condominium project, so there is a vesting tentative map under review as well. The townhomes are 3 stories with a 4th floor balcony deck area for usable open space. The units are accessed along new private streets that are accessed from Cesano Court. The project also includes 3 outdoor amenity areas, and as a streamlined housing project using state density bonus law, the applicants are requesting waivers to deviate from some of the objective design standards. Again, this is the site plan showing the 8 units on the smaller side and the 21 units on the larger side. It also shows the shape of the properties as I was trying to explain earlier. To give a quick overview of the floor plan and elevations, I'm only showing the largest of the buildings. So this is the 8-unit building, showing showing the units having a mix of 2-car side-by-side and tandem garages. The second and third floors have the primary living spaces, and then above there are usable open space balconies. These are not considered roof decks as far as the zoning code defines them. This shows the elevations. It meets the base, middle, top, the materials, objective standards, as well as the vertical and horizontal shifts. 3 different color schemes are provided for the 5 different buildings to also provide differentiation. The key considerations for this project include conformance with the objective standards, the use of waivers, which are allowed when conformance with the code would physically preclude the construction of the proposed units at the proposed density. However, this project is also eligible for 1 concession, which is allowed for something that would reduce the either building or operational costs of the project. As far as our review, because we are still in process with the review, there are certain items that are not currently being met in the plans and are not currently being requested through waivers, but these could either be addressed through requesting additional waivers or by making changes to the plans. And so these include the privacy landscape requirement, specifically at the property line between the proposed project and the apartments that are in the city of Mountain View to the right of the project. The next one is the objective design standard that requires a bench or other seating. There is one for the larger property, but the smaller property would need one as well. Third, one of the objective design standards requires 15% fenestration area for each end unit of the townhouses facing the street. What is presented in the plans combines all of the facades that are facing the street, and the average of that is 15%, but we would like that to be met for each facade individually. Next, one of the elevations, the left elevation of building 3, does not meet the horizontal shift objective standard requirement. And then unit type 4 does not meet the objective design standard to have an individual entry width of 5 feet. The stoop for that unit type is L-shaped, but the part of the L that's directly in front of the door is narrower than 5 feet. This is the list of the waivers that are requested by this project. The first is to provide no retail or retail-like uses, where some retail would typically be required as a part of the retail preservation ordinance. We have determined that this would not be eligible for a waiver because it does not preclude the proposed density. However, it can be requested as a concession, and that, is reasonable for this project. Next, there is a waiver requested to reduce the side yard setback adjacent to the condominium common space. So as I was explaining, some of the trees along Susano Court that are in a pocket parcel that is not a part of this property to be reduced from 10 feet to 4 foot 8 feet. Next, to reduce the rear setback also adjacent to that condominium common use parcel from 10 feet to 0 feet for the refuse accessory structure, and then 8 feet for the actual townhome buildings. Next is to waive the 30% build to line development standard along Susano Court. There are a number of items along the right of way, essentially transformer, fire backflow preventer, as well as the driveways that seem to preclude the ability to meet this standard. Next is to reduce the number of required street trees. Typically, one street tree per 30 feet of frontage is required. They are proposing one fewer than required on the smaller lot and 4 fewer than required on the larger lot. We can discuss that in more detail. And then next would be to reduce the height of the ground floor finished floor by approximately 0.5 foot to 1.2 feet. This is to accommodate the garages being at grade and to provide interior space that's all at the same level. And finally, to reduce privacy restrictions on windows and balconies adjacent to the residential building. Again, this is the apartment, the Mountain View apartment complex. Typically, the windows would be required to be high-silled or obscured glazing. And we believe that because the proposed setback there is around 10 feet, that it would be appropriate to add additional privacy measures. In terms of environmental review, a class 32 exemption for infill development is being prepared. And our recommendation is that the ARB conduct a study session to provide feedback on whether minor adjustments can bring the project into closer adherence with the objective design standards. This concludes my presentation, and the applicant also has a presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Emily. Just wanted to point out that, again, Emily had mentioned this, but just for my fellow ARB members, this project is subject to the director's decision and does not require a recommendation from the ARB. So just to keep that in mind as we're going through this study session here. So my apologies for not saying that right out of the gate. Emily covered it though, so just wanted to circle back to it. Now for the applicant, you'll have 10 minutes to speak. I'm going to request that you please state and spell your name for the record, and we'll start to give you the eye when you're getting close to your time being up, but you do have a timer as well to note.
Hopefully I won't cover over with my laptop as I'm talking.
Thanks very much.
Please give me just a moment here to get connected.
Not a problem. Take your time to get settled and get the computer all set up.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is John Hickey. I can spell that later for Veronica. I'm a Vice President of Development with Summerhill Homes, and I'm pleased to be here this morning talking with you. Before I begin, are you able to see? No, you're not. All right, so give me just a moment further. I am in the Zoom.
And she has paused your time, just so you're.
Oh, that's all right. Oh, now we are. Okay, great. Thank you. Lovely. Again, good morning, everyone. John Hickey, VP of Development with Summerhill Homes. You're familiar with Summerhill. We've been working in Palo Alto and throughout the Bay Area for close to 50 years now. And we're pleased to be here in Palo Alto again with a project that we're bringing to you this morning. Emily summarized the project and also summarized some of the waivers of objective development standards that we're requesting pursuant to the state density bonus law. And just to give you a little bit more color on that, we actually talked with Emily about these late last week, and it's sort of it's an in-process discussion. So she raised a couple of points that we hadn't identified previously as requiring a waiver. Some of those we think we actually can work through and address. Others we may still need to request a waiver on. So this morning, as Emily said and Chair, you mentioned this is a study session. So we'll talk a little bit about our design intent. We'll talk a little bit about the project, but what we really want to do here this morning is hear from you and get your comments so that we can hopefully incorporate those as much as possible into the project. The site itself, if I can, hopefully, there we go. The site, as Emily mentioned, is at the intersection of Cesano Court and El Camino Real. I happened to notice in one of the earlier screens that it mentioned El Camino Way, and obviously that's not the address, that's farther up El Camino. And it's 4335 and 4345 El Camino Real. To the northwest, just for context, along the street is the Homewood Suites. Just to the left as you're facing the site, and to the right as you're facing the site is MV Apartments, which is actually in the city of Mountain View. That's a 5-story apartment building, which actually was a Summerhill Apartment Homes project that was developed a few years ago. And I can tell you a little bit more about that project too, including things related to the trees and the landscaping on site that provide privacy for that building. And then behind the site, as Emily mentioned, is the Palo Alto Greens condominium community. It's a 3-story building plus some duplexes back there. We are proposing 29 3-story townhome style condominiums. It's 5 buildings total with obviously landscaping and then the outdoor amenity spaces. Our architect will talk about the architecture, and our landscape architect will talk a little bit about the outdoor amenities. The homes will be a mix of 3 and 4 bedrooms. The average unit size is about 1,700 square feet, a little bit more than 1,700. The architecture itself is a contemporary style. Let me switch forward to that slide for you. It's a contemporary style that combines pitched roofs and classic materials with warm colors that complement the landscape and we hope the surrounding context. We've configured the buildings, and this is important, the buildings to provide an activated pedestrian-friendly street presence along El Camino and Cesano Court. The front doors and ground level patios face outward toward the street. Vehicle circulation, as Emily mentioned, is provided through 2 entry points from Cesano, and each unit will have its own attached private 2-car garage. The bike storage for the residents will be in the garages, and there will also be guest bike parking throughout the site on both of the parcels. I want to mention that the private streets will be 32 feet wide. That's wider than you see in a lot of other cities, but that's in compliance with the city's requirement. We did not request an objective standards waiver for that. And we'll also have trees planted between the garages to provide some greenscape on that side of the building. All the units will have the private balconies and the roof decks. As I said, overall, the idea here is to develop a contemporary urban suburban type of community that fits well with the range of residential densities in the area. Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind coming up and adding a few words about the architecture. Just sit right there.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Master with SDG Architects. Thank you. As John noted, the townhouse has been designed in the contemporary architecture style. We have used variations in the roof line and massing to provide overall visual interest and human scale at the street level. This one, perfect. As viewed from El Camino, you can see the variety in the roof that we have. These include hipped roofs, shed elements, and faux dormers at the upper level. And again, just to provide that additional articulation to the street scene. The front doors face onto El Camino to engage with the public space, and the front stoops are set back at least 15 to 18 feet to allow for private residential entries. There will be landscaping between the entries and the public sidewalk along the frontage. We will plant public trees along the edge of the sidewalk as well as private on-site streets between the sidewalk and the homes. The 2 images on the screen are viewing from Cesano on either side of Cesano Court. Again, you'll see the similar variety in the roof with breaks in the roof plane and the articulation of the architecture. We have used complementary color schemes throughout the project, as Emily pointed out previously, as well as architecture that engages with the public space. Here we have the front elevation of Building 5, one of the 8-unit buildings. We have a complementary mix of high-quality exterior finishes, including plaster with 20/30 light sand finish, 8-inch smooth fiber cement siding, smooth fiber cement panels, and brick veneer at all the entries. And that's providing the different levels of articulation across the elevations. Our roofing will be composition shingle roofing, and we will use steel and wood railings for the balconies and decks. We will also have wall sconces at the entries. And again, our intent is to combine simple but refined materials with contemporary roof forms and building massing to develop an urban suburban style. And with that, I'd like to ask Roman from R3 to talk about our landscape architecture.
Good morning, Roman DeSoto, R3 Studios Landscape Architects, as evident by my green suit. I did want to talk a little bit first off about our proposed plant palette. One of the things we do when we're working on a project such as this is try and find a good balance of native and non-native species, low light tolerant species of plants, but also plants that are low water use. We understand maintenance also after the fact that we're trying to avoid having plants trimmed into hedges and globes and giraffes and things like that. So we try and think about those kinds of things after the fact as much as we are initially. Also screening of the sides of buildings, screening to provide shade, screening to provide undesirable views. We think about those. And then, of course, the treatment areas. There is an image on one of your sheets about how we look at that and trying to make that actually look very presentable as opposed to just a leftover space. So those are important things when thinking about plant palette and how we want to see native and non-native species work together. The first thing I'd like to talk about, in addition to the plant palette, is the amenity spaces next to Building 1. So in this space, we tried to create a little small outdoor space that has several uses, enhanced by a textured treatment of concrete, but also a electric barbecue counter, a communal table, string lights, and then a conversation area with a table. In and around that would be a lush planting of, again, native and non-native species. We understand this portion of the site may get a little bit of shade, so we're very cognizant about what types of plants we would propose in this area. The second amenity space next to Building 3 is one that faces Cesano Court. This is an area where there's a pergola, seating area, tables, kind of modern Adirondack chairs, kind of lounge seating. And then out in front, we're proposing some specimen trees, such as native California oak trees.
I'm going to step in because I'm noticing our time, and I've shortchanged Roman a little bit, but he's certainly available to answer more questions afterwards if there's more detail that you'd like him to give you, or if you'd like us to take a few more minutes, we're happy to do that as well. It's your discretion.
How about we give you one more minute, see what you can come up with?
Okay.
As I was describing the amenity spaces, the other amenity space to the, I guess that would be the northeast, Building 3, is another barbecue area. This one, electric, of course. What we've done there, because we've got a trash enclosure adjacent to it, we've provided a metal screen, which more of a decorative perforated metal screen, seating area, and textured paving.
that's about it.
Great, thanks very much. And we will have questions, so don't go too far.
Wonderful. So
Appreciate that.
thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to present and happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation to the applicant. At this time, we open the floor to public comment. So if there's anyone who'd like to speak from the public on this item, you'll be given 3 minutes. We ask that you state and spell your name. Veronica, do we have any raised hands or public speaker cards?
I have no public comments.
No public comment. Okay, and just to remind the chambers that we did receive 2 emails in regards to this project. So we can, we might be bringing that up during our course of conversation. Okay, and at this point, we're going to turn it over to the ARB, who can ask questions of the applicant or the staff. And Board Member Adcock, would you like to kick us off?
I always have too many questions, so apologies in advance. Regarding the waivers and concessions, if I understand correctly, no concessions have been asked for, but several waivers, and one that Emily, you mentioned regarding the landscape screening could potentially be a concession. Did I understand that correctly?
I had suggested that the concession could be used for not having a retail component to this
Oh, that's right.
project.
Okay, thank you. And so regarding landscape screening towards the condominiums on the Mountain View side, that has not, it was not one of the waiver lists. So how is that being addressed?
Correct. It's an item that in our review, because this project is not complete yet, has been identified as something that needs to be addressed. And so I brought it to the ARB's attention so that you may also provide feedback on that.
Okay. And kind of related to that, as I look at the site plan, it was mentioned that the interior streets, the private streets were asked to be 32 feet. Can you show in the plan where that is it face of building dimension, or an actual street, and also why exceeding standards on interior streets?
I will need a second to pull that up, but perhaps the applicant could also provide some information on that.
Are you asking about why the 32 feet is
Yeah,
required?
why, and also if you could show on plan view where that is and where the dimensions are being taken.
Certainly. Well, I can, give me a moment to pull back up the shared screen, but I can answer in the meantime. It's actually, it's a code, it's an ordinance requiring 32-foot wide private streets in Palo Alto. And the measurement is taken from face of building to face of building. So it's not the travel way itself. It includes, that 32 feet includes the driveway apron or garage apron.
So on that note, is there a sidewalk along there as well, or is it sort of decorative paving?
It's not decorative paving, it's or sidewalk. It's not intended to be a pedestrian route there. Sorry, give me just a moment. I'll see if I can pull up the.
Emily has it up on the screen.
Oh,
so
you do?
can
Great.
Feel free to
Oh, thank
point
you.
out what we're talking
Actually,
about here.
is there, let's see, you're showing, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. So actually, if you could go to L1.1 or that would be an even better sheet, which is, yeah, it's hard to, I would bet somewhere around probably sheet 80.
These are the street sections.
Yeah, that's fine too. So this is actually taken from the joint trench sheets, which are not what, are you able to find?
Yeah, actually, that was pretty helpful.
Okay, that's fine. So yeah, the short answer is that the intent here is the front door is obviously faced on the opposite side from the alleys and from the garages. So we want pedestrians to be thinking of the front door as the pedestrian side. The streets will be 32 feet wide in terms of building to building, but there's not intended to be the pedestrian side of the building because there isn't a pedestrian entry on the side of the building. These are not designed as what Mountain View calls townhomes, where they are, have the garage and the front door on the same side of the building.
So, yeah, this helps. So it's the private street, but it's not the driveway itself. It's including the curb. So the driveway itself is 26, including the concrete curb.
The drive, the vehicle surface, what I would call the paved vehicle surface is, I believe it's 26.
Okay. And can you repeat why what the requirement is?
So the requirement's coming from the code for
Okay.
private streets. And this was a voter initiative that was put into the code. And it
Okay.
says that streets serving 5 or more lots shall be no less than 32 feet wide.
Okay, so it's just meeting code. It's not like planning asking for anything more than, okay, thank you for clarifying that.
And actually, may I ask Jody, I think that staff's interpretation has been that 5 or more lots includes condominium units, because we're actually just 2 single lot subdivisions here, technically, with multiple condominium units on it.
And actually regarding the condominium, I have a kind of related question. I have not seen this kind of jigsaw puzzle setup of plans. It was very interesting, so thank you for doing that. But it seems like 2 units are, stairs are kind of stacked. How does that work? This is not really a planning question, just for my education. How does that work in terms of lot split in a condominium or townhouse?
Well, the condominiums are defined by the condominium plan, which is basically an airspace condominium. So in that sense, it's no different from a sort of stacked flat condominium that you might see, where, you have multiple levels of condominium units over each other. For the most part, because there's a lot of demand for this townhome style of living, where there's nobody living above you or living below you. We try to keep them at side by side as much as possible. The reason that we have this slight overlap in the stairs is actually something to accommodate Palo Alto's specific requirements regarding the amount of space that's needed for bikes and other storage in the unit.
So it's legally, it's going to be a condominium, not a townhouse. Got it.
Exactly. And that's why I mentioned that it's a single, technically 2 single lots, but then each of the individual units is defined by a condominium plan, which will be developed. The way the process works, it gets developed during the improvement plans and the building plans, and gets reviewed by the Department of Real Estate.
Sounds good. Thank you. I have many other questions, but I will hold for others to ask their questions.
Sure. I'll jump in here for a moment if you don't mind. Emily, would you mind pulling up the site plan, please? Beautiful. So I wanted to go over some of these waivers that we are looking for. So the concept of the retail and no retail, understand that. So the one thing that I didn't understand is it does seem to, with a townhome style of architecture, it would preclude additional units. Isn't that correct, though? So I'm wondering why it wouldn't work as a waiver and we'd have to make it a concession. I guess I just want a little bit more clarification on that, because I'm thinking about it going, the waivers would make it so that you can't build the density that you're looking to build, but with a townhome, you can't exactly have the whole first floor be retail, because that would preclude the amount that you could build. Is that correct, or am I misunderstanding?
It's my understanding that it is the density, the number of units, rather than the architectural style of those units.
Okay.
So it would be possible to,
But it would be allowed to waive the retail under a concession, and they are allowed to have one concession.
yes.
Perfect. Okay, waiver number 2, side and rear setbacks. Just to dive into this a little bit, something that I noticed in this, and I don't know how to zoom in here, but I'm going to do my best to draw all over your thing here. So part of this is that the setback that is reducing the side yard adjacent to the condominium use from parcel from 10 feet to 4'8". That's on this side here.
I realize that this is not the site plan that has the dimensions on it, and I should be on this page.
Perfect. Yeah, I just want to go over these setbacks, because some of them, it felt a little confused when we were talking about it. This being here, the trash is looking to avoid the setback, but it's a low structure at what, 6 to 8 feet tall versus this condominium being only asking for a 2-foot concession, and that's, that's where the tall building is, but this one over here being the trash is the one that wanted to go to the 0-foot setback, and that's at waiver 2B. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then 2A, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit.
Yeah, it's to the left here.
So this one here, and it's just for this portion right there that it would be reduced back, and it really is the front porch. Actually, it's really right there that it's the 4'8", and that's to get to the front porch. Is that correct, or is it coming all the way down here?
Yes, it extends just slightly further than where you had drawn that. No, yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And on that note, the reason that that is 4'8" is because it would, with the street, with this other side, all of that makes sense. And to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, this portion of property right here and this portion of property right here belong to the condominium that's over in that direction. They are not to be able, that you can't develop anything on those, correct? And they are required to be used for landscaping for that condominium.
Correct. It's part of the condominium's commonly owned open space.
Got it. Is there any possibility that in the future, those 2 slivers of parcel could be sold independently?
It's my understanding that it would require unanimous approval of all of the condo owners. It would also potentially bring the project out of conformance for their usable open space requirements. I haven't looked into that.
Not a problem. Yeah. So just in the foreseeable future, that will always remain landscape, and that will always remain landscape. So having a 4'8" setback here is really from a landscape sliver of an undevelopable property.
Yes, there is a fence there, so that is something to keep in mind, but.
Okay.
Chair, may I?
And then, sorry?
May I interject for just a moment on that point?
Please,
Yeah,
go ahead.
so the fence is actually part of our site, so that would come down. And yes, we've looked at this issue. Not only would it raise the issues that Emily just mentioned, but it would actually require a subdivision map or parcel map to create that as a separate legal parcel, and it would be a non-conforming parcel, so you wouldn't actually be able to create it as a separate parcel for individual sale.
Got it. So the only person that would ever, or the only property that would ever want to buy this sliver would be
us.
you guys.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Still staying on the subject of these setbacks, so that's there, okay. And then the large bulk of this here does appear to be at that 8'11". Is that accurate as well? So as the building steps back, does it get up to this 8'11" here, or am I misunderstanding that? I'm looking at the applicant now.
You're looking at which portion?
Yeah, thank you for zooming in, Emily. So it's got this 8'11" setback here, and I'm trying to understand where exactly that's going to. Is that the sort of bulk facade of that building?
I'm going to actually look to Jennifer on that because I think she's checking the plans right now. But yes, I believe that's the case. So what you're seeing there for the 4'8" is the ground floor, the stoop there, but then up, yeah, the second floor and third floor are stepped farther back.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, and then Emily, I'm going to jump over to waiver 3, that 30% build to. Could you please explain that one a little bit more for me? I want to make sure I've got that covered.
Yes, I'm moving the plans around. So along Cesano Court here for this property on the right side, normally there would be a 30% build to the setback. But, on this side, the amenity space is here, and then the driveway, and then there's fire and other equipment. The transformers also
Right, all of
over here.
that's in the way. Okay. Probably better to have that on a streetscape than somewhere tucked on the private street. Again, on this note, so if you scroll back up just a teeny bit so we can see the end of street C. Okay, so there's no possibility for driving through here because of the fact that that would cross this little area of land right here. So this could not be a through street. It has to be a dead end.
Correct.
Okay, and on that same note, there's a bike path coming from somewhere over here that is what was mentioned in the public comment that they would like to see this bike path here, but that property is not owned by this applicant, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so both of those are out. Okay, please jump
Just
in.
a second. So about that through street, and you mentioned earlier that the fence is part of this property. And did you say it was going to be removed? So was the pedestrian part of that going to be accessible from Susanna Court?
No, I believe we'll be installing a new fence along.
I see.
I think we have a sheet that actually shows the fence line. If Austin, if you're able to find that in the plan set, we can probably reference it. So that we won't have, because of that proximity on the front of building 3, we don't want to build a new fence because that would be a fence right outside your front stoop. But we will have, for privacy and for safety, we will have a fence along the, I'll call it page north and page east side.
And it will end in the upper left corner?
Yes, that's right. The fence will extend essentially over to just about where the trash enclosure is. There's actually, I don't know if you can see, but there is a very small portion of of our site that does have frontage directly onto Susano Court. That little, yes, exactly, that little tiny bit there, which is actually works well because that is going to be the pullout location. We've talked to Waste Collection about this. That's going to be the pullout location for the bins that are going to be in that trash enclosure.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, then find the pin. So the fence would be here, and that's right here is where the fence would end.
Yes, that is exactly my recollection. And as I'm hoping they can pull up the right sheet, which, yes, they're nodding. So that's a yes.
Okay. And part of my line of questioning on this is just about, at the end of your presentation, you're talking about the shared amenities, the outdoor spaces, because on the 2 properties, they're similar, but a little bit different amenities. So presumably people living on this side could cross over and use that barbecue area, kind of jaywalking across the little court.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It'll be a single HOA serving the entire project. But because of the separation of the public street in the middle, we wanted to make sure that both sides of the street had some on-parcel amenity spaces, but they're welcome to use the amenity spaces in there. In fact, the mailbox kiosk is located on parcel 3. You might wonder why I keep referring to parcel 3 rather than parcel 2. It's because the parcel map that created these parcels defined them as parcel 1 and parcel 3. So for consistency in my mind, I continue to refer to them that way.
Thank you.
Just a quick question on the trash collection. So you mentioned on parcel 3, the trash bin will be pulled out from that corner. What
Yes.
about parcel 1? Because it's a little bit further.
Yeah, great question. So let's go over to that for a moment. We've actually had extensive discussions with trash collection services about this. So what we're doing here is we've got the trash enclosure there, as you can see it, and it is yes, exactly. The carts will be pulled out. The bins will be pulled out and pulled to the street. There's actually, you can see just to the side of building 1 there's a couple of sort of hashed marks. It's actually the ADA marking there because there's a little ramp down there so that those bins can be pulled out and put onto the street right there. And we're going to be, the HOA is going to be paying an additional pull-out fee to Waste Collection to pull those out and then push them back in. It's a bit of a challenge, candidly, for us because the combined waste really makes sense in the context of an apartment building where you have on-site management and leasing officers. You have on-site staff that's available to do things like pulling out bins and stuff like that. For townhome and for sale product, it's very different because you don't have on-site staff. You have an HOA manager and you have a landscaper that's hired, but the landscaper is not there on site every day. So it is something that in the past we've definitely preferred to have our residents have the option of having their bins, their carts in their unit, in their garage, and they just pull them out and have them collected right in front of their unit. But the city has not allowing that anymore, which is why we're doing the trash enclosures.
Thank you for the clarification. The last two waivers I do want to go over as well. Waiver 4, waiver or reduction of development standard, reduce the number of street trees. So I'm looking at the landscape architect here. Can you explain where the street trees are that are being added and why you think you can't get those last few in?
Come on up. I can help with that too, because I've actually got a slide that'll help illustrate that a little bit.
Perfect.
And so if I can, do you mind if I go ahead and share my
Please.
screen for a second? If I can, oh darn it, but now I've got to pull the slideshow back up. Where did it go? There it is. Why is that not sharing? There we go. Okay, give me a moment here. I'm going to scroll down through and let's see, one sheet that we want to see is this one. So,
Bless you.
Or even the colored, the rendered ones, actually.
yeah, that's fine too. Yeah, so we can go to that.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I guess the easy answer to that, or to that question, is that due to the amount of utilities, but also the water treatment area and the storm drain line that services those water treatment areas, especially along El Camino.
Mhm.
So those small little purple trees there are pushed back to clear the storm drain line. We were hopeful that we could kind of push them forward to count as street trees, but just based on the impacts that that treatment area would have closer to the building would essentially negate the fact that we couldn't make that work. We tried to fill in as many spaces as possible with street trees. So we are counting ones that may not look like street trees. So the one to the far right in that lower corner is 6 feet within the sidewalk. So we're counting that as a street tree. And then everything else along Cezanne, those larger green trees there, those are street trees. And then of course, we're saving the one, I believe it's a platanus out on El Camino in front of building 2, and then adding another one there. I know street trees along that area, they're at a, I believe it's a 25 or 30 foot spacing. So we've done our best there to avoid existing utilities, street lights, et cetera.
And to clarify really quick, that is one additional tree. At the time the staff report was published, the one in the bottom right corner, we weren't sure if it was 6 feet away from the sidewalk or not, but now that it is, that means that the deficit is 4 trees rather than 5.
Okay.
And I just want to point out too that that objective standard doesn't provide any exception for when you have a driveway, right?
Mhm.
So, we've got 2 driveways here, so it's kind of hard to plant a tree in the middle of the driveway, obviously. And then as you can see down next to building 5, that's utility space. Next to building 1, we would have loved to have put another one in there, but that's utility space. And then actually along El Camino, I just want,
Transformer.
yeah, and actually along El Camino, I just want to show something, quickly from street view. So you can see this is existing utility infrastructure. It's actually mostly Caltrans infrastructure there. So it really limits it, not to mention that it's right at an intersection. So you have 2 crosswalks there.
Understood. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And then waiver 6, reduce restrictions on windows and balconies adjacent to residential buildings. And it sounded like those corner buildings, excuse me, frog in my throat. Those corner buildings, the amount of glazing was basically being added up and then divided overall instead of being 15% per building.
So those are 2 separate waivers.
Okay.
The 15% glazing is for the, here, let me share the screen
Oh,
again.
that's the one that wasn't covered under a waiver at this time. Is that correct?
So yes, but also it's for different, those are for the ones that are facing Cezanne Court
Okay.
primarily. Whereas the privacy is for building 4 facing the apartments.
Understood. Okay,
Yeah, there isn't a privacy issue.
let's tackle these one at a
across
time then.
Cezanne.
Okay, so waiver 6 is the one across building 4. Oh, I don't have my pen open. Is that correct? So waiver 6 is in regards to building 4's privacy because it's butting up against the other
Yes.
apartment complex. Excuse me.
May I speak briefly to the 15% one?
Please.
Yeah, so this is one of the ones that we discussed with Emily last week, and when she pointed out to us that 15% requirement needed to be met with regard to each of the buildings, not as an average. We're taking a look at that again. I think we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to address that one.
Excellent. Okay.
So-
Okay, perfect. And then, so this one is the restrictions on the balconies adjacent to the residential buildings. Emily, just for clarification, I'm trying to make sure I'm understanding. So waiver 6 is in regards to the one at building 4.
I don't have the list of
That's
waivers
okay.
in front of me to know how they are
Sorry.
numbered.
Yeah, it says
I'm
waiver
sorry.
6, reduce restrictions on windows and balconies adjacent to residential buildings.
Yes, that's correct. And so that is for building 4 facing the apartments, which are within the city of Mountain View, but we are still considering obviously a residential use for the objective standard that requires privacy, glazing, landscaping, other measures when it is within a certain distance of other residential uses and has windows, like kind of primary windows that are facing that direction.
Perfect. And just so I'm understanding as well, this setback here of 10'2", they're in compliance with that setback. That's an acceptable setback. They're not asking for a waiver there. They're not closer to the property line than they should be.
That's correct.
Okay, good. All right, I have gone over the waiver list. I would like to let someone else have a turn to speak as well. So instead of hogging the microphone here. So Yingshi, did you have
Yeah,
something?
can I have a follow-up question on the waiver 6? So for the proposed building, it will be like 10 feet or so away from the property line. Do we know how far away the apartment is away from the property line from their side?
We actually, it's the distance from window to window is very close to 30 feet. We haven't actually gone out and surveyed it to get the exact distance. Based on aerial, we have an estimate, but that hasn't been verified with a ground reference. And actually, if you look at the approved entitlement plans for MV for that apartment building, it shows it as being actually a little bit more than 30 feet from window to window.
So you mean like for the upper floors on this property, like
Yeah.
second floor to?
Yeah, second floor. So it's very close to 30 feet. It may be a little bit less than 30 feet. It may be a little bit more than 30 feet. We
Gotcha.
haven't verified that yet. And as you know, the standard is if you're within 30 feet, that's when the requirement kicks in.
And another question on the site plan is the,
Sorry, there's also a requirement within 40 feet. I don't want to dismiss that, but that's a separate requirement.
gotcha. And another question about the site plan is the bench requirement. So Emily, maybe could you please clarify the requirement for the location and how it works? Or maybe the applicant.
No, I'm going to pull up that objective standard from the code.
Board member, if I could, this is another one that we weren't aware of this requirement until late last week. So we haven't had a chance to take a look and see whether we can comply with it, but I expect that we can meet that. In fact, there's an existing bus stop bench out there right now. So among other things, it would be helpful for us to hear exactly what the requirement is, but I suspect we may be able to address that.
Okay. And just to my fellow board members, that list of items that have been identified as additional standards the project does not appear to comply with that have not been asked for as waivers is located on packet page 23. So the waivers were on packet page 21. And then if you flip the page to packet page 23, then there's that list of additional items, which again, we understand you didn't get to last week and many of them you guys are going to be tackling on your own, but we do want to cover them during the
We appreciate that. And we appreciate the clarification on them too.
Yes, so this is in the attachment that goes through the compliance with the objective design standards. This is on packet page 41. I've also pulled up the full text as it's written in the code. It states primary building entry shall provide at least one exterior seating area or bench within 30 feet of building entry or path leading to building entry. We've discussed that for this style of development, there isn't really a primary building entrance compared to when it's, an apartment building. And I think we can also maybe take a look at if the amenity space that's closest to Cesano Court would also qualify. We're still looking at it.
Yeah, that was definitely going to be one of my questions is if, because that seating area for the larger parcel is really quite close to Cesano, whether that counts or not, if there's a distance requirement, something like that. So again, this is something I do feel could be worked out one way or the other. But just providing clarification to the applicant, I think would be super helpful.
Well, just another kind of related item to that though, Emily, is like from this objective standard, it like within 30 feet is kind of for visiting public or public in the area versus the private, the seating area towards Cesano Court is more of for the residents kind of thing. So I think whether the requirement is waived or not, I don't think doing it in lieu for that, the private kind of patio area, I don't think makes sense. So just my opinion on that.
Understood. Thank you.
So I know you're still keep working, developing the site plan and working on the building design. So I want to check whether there is any revisions on the left elevation of building 3 where it is that it doesn't meet the horizontal shift requirement.
We haven't looked at that yet, but that is definitely one of the ones in my mind that we want to look at. Our constraint there, just so you're aware of it, is that we're looking right out onto that amenity space. So we do have some limits in terms of how far out we can go without encroaching onto that amenity space and reducing its attractiveness. But yes, that is, we see how that doesn't currently comply, and we want to take a look to see what we can do to try to address that.
Okay, thanks. And another question about the building. So on the longer building, the 8-unit building there, well, actually, I think it's happened on every building. There are the little windows on the very top of the building.
Mhm.
Is it like the dormer or the 4th floor, or are they accessible?
Are you talking about the fourth, like in the roof dormers?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are actually faux dormers. Those are actually the backside of the, I'm not calling it a roof deck, at the 4th floor balcony. And it's a combination of the stairwell that goes all the way up to access it, and then also just the back of the roof. But rather than just have a plain shed roof there, we added the dormers, but they're not actually true dormers. They're just faux glazing.
Okay.
So is it that they're not enclosed?
The 4th floor?
So they're really just truly an addition? Like they're just
Yes,
tacked on there?
yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Actually, Emily, can you please show the plan? It's on sheet 17.1 if we understand it right. So on sheet
Yes, I can get to that
17.1, if you
page.
look at the floor plan.
Scrolling through the 15s.
So are those windows just with blackened glass?
I don't know if they'll be blackened. What was, okay. That's a yes.
Thank you.
Was there a part of this sheet I can best direct the view to?
Yeah, so we are talking. Yeah. We're talking about this area here. You can see the windows here. Those are how you will treat it as. It's not accessible space, but.
That's correct. It's not accessible space.
Okay.
It's fully enclosed.
Yeah, it's fully
But it's
enclosed.
fully enclosed.
And just to give you a little bit of flavor on that. So we initially had it without those dormers, and we thought that the roof line lacked interest. So that's why we've included those. We think it elevates the elevation, I will say.
Is the area being counted as square footage since it's fully enclosed?
Oh, when I say fully enclosed, I mean, as in it's not even accessible space.
No, understood, but if it's surrounded by 4 walls and a roof?
The top floor, the 4th floor balcony is partially covered. You can sort of see the edge of the roof line there is the double dash. Do you want to go ahead and explain? Yeah.
So it's really an attic space. It's not conditioned. It does have those windows that would be blackened glass, but it's really unconditioned attic space up in that shed area.
Tall is it at its height?
I don't know, maybe 5 feet. I don't know. I'd have to look into that.
I think the section on sheet A 18.1, could we go there? I'm trying to understand where this even is. Is it that window on the left?
Yes, actually, that is correct.
And so what is that
And-
space where the cursor is right now?
So again, it's really part of the roof structure. It's not accessible space. It's not usable space. You can't get into it.
But it does appear to be 9 feet,
It's
1
right
inches
here,
tall.
And you could put stairs.
Yes, and it really has, sorry, to interrupt you. It really has to do with how that roof ends up being framed. I could see that dormer part being framed on the lower roof below.
So this is the main roof, and this is the little dormer hoop-de-doop.
Exactly.
Which is creating this space, which if I understand, like I'm sure in and out of the page, there's some nuances to it. But presumably you could have a ladder and have a storage space up there. Is that true?
There wouldn't be, I mean, you'd have to have an attic access to that space. But it's not going to be designed structurally for anything to be stored up there.
Emily, if I'm understanding correctly, attic spaces are required to be 5 feet or less in height.
I don't know if that only applies to single-family houses.
Okay.
Yeah, they also need to be accessible if we were going to count them otherwise.
So you can build volume that's not accessible and have it not count. I know this is a tricky one. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
we
I want to make
shouldn't
sure.
be having void spaces. We
Right.
No,
do-
traditionally in town, this is allowed when it's up on a third floor that's not accessible. We've seen it many times on attics of houses we build with a pitched roof. You
Mhm.
have a void, it's taller than 5 feet, but it's for all practical purposes inaccessible. There's no way a person could get there shy of using a ladder. So the planning department has not included this as an FAR calculation space, which is what you're driving towards.
A little bit, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm understanding whether it's FAR or not. And then additionally to that, it's if the volume's being built, then I guess the secondary question is why not use it as attic space? Like, wouldn't that be an amenity for the people living there? But again, I understand that this falls under FAR rules and regulations, but man, put a ladder up there and then all of a sudden you've got storage space for the people living in these condominiums. That would be a,
But why don't we wait and see if it
benefit?
survives our
please.
critique first?
Yeah. Thank you.
I suspect it might not.
Few items in the air for those ones. Okay, yes, please continue.
And speaking of this section, so what's the roof assembly? If you see the thickness below the roof deck, it seems like it double height as compared to the floor assembly down below. So
We usually allow around 24 inches, which would be floor assembly as well as potentially ducts running through that area to feed the floors below.
okay, next. Other than this inaccessible space, I also noticed there are some other spaces. It seems like it takes lots of areas. For example, if we go sheet A15, the floor plan, the first floor plan.
10.1.
Yeah, on the first floor, just A15. Yeah, so if you see, could you please zoom in on the first floor plan on upper left? Upper left. If you see, there are several areas like this which count towards FAR, and what are they? Are they accessible?
It's not, it's just a projection on the outside of the building to create articulation at that porch.
But that area does count towards FAR, is it correct?
I believe we have included that, yeah.
So if you put a door from that room, you could have a closet.
Yeah.
Potentially, yeah.
Would it fit a hot water heater or a furnace?
From the interior, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, because if we switch to sheet A 15.2, it does include it in the FAR, I think.
Yeah, we've included it in the FAR. We can certainly take a look and see whether structurally we can allow a door there. I mean, we do have obviously some shear wall constraints that may preclude that from being used as a closet space, but we can certainly take a look.
On the roof plan, could you please talk a little bit more about your thoughts about different roof slopes? We see 4 in 12, 3 in 12, and also 5 in 12.
Is there a particular sheet you want to see?
Just the next one. So we did extensive work with the fire district on accessing these buildings for fire purpose. And so the 3 and 12 that you're seeing coming from the rear side of the building up was a request from fire so that they're able to access the rear side of the building with their equipment and such if they need to get up on the roof. And then similarly, as we were coming back, I'll say around the front and up to the highest points of the roof, they had requested a 5 and 12 maximum slope to get up to that upper decks roof over the deck space.
I'm
Sorry, I can't.
Sorry. Have you done a section study cutting through these 3 and 12 areas? Because on the elevation, it seems like the upper portion, it already goes to the lower, it's like only 3 or 4 feet above the above the 3rd floor, but there is still like bathrooms below. So how does it meet the clearance of the bathroom requirement?
There is a lower section in the bathroom. One section, or one moment. So I don't think it's not included in our section study within the packet, but we did look at that. There is a part of the roof that does meet, it is lower than the rest of the roof in that bathroom, but it does meet code requirements.
Okay.
Just to help you out, the elevation on sheet 15.4, I think helps with trying to understand how that 312 comes down on the rear elevation to kind of halfway.
Yes,
Those little
the
spots, I
rear,
think,
the
yeah.
rear elevation, correct. And that's, as I mentioned, per fire access request.
But generally, like overall, you've got the 312 for most part on the front and the dormers, the back and the dormers, and 412 for the majority, but then you have this weird condition of switching from 312 to 412. If I look at 16.1, we're still in the questions portion, but it seems like your slopes are kind of making framing more complicated than it needs to be. Like
I'm
on that
sorry, where's
upper
the
right, for
transition that you're
instance,
talking about?
like here. This is 412, this is 312. You have that hip doing something different than that hip.
Oh, I see the transition around the
Yeah.
corner there. Yeah.
Sorry, I jumped in on your comment.
Yeah.
Your microphone.
Yes, if we go to sheet A 17.1. Could you please go to the third floor plan? Yeah, third, the one above. Yeah. Yeah, I think the question I was asking is, the section I was asking is cutting through this area because when your roof goes down to this part, it's already been pretty low. So we want to make sure that this shower has enough clearance. And you said you already did some study on that.
We have, yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And I don't have other questions for now.
Peter and David, you guys want to jump in?
You folks are really great on details. I don't think there's anything you haven't examined here. So I can't
So
really
I'd
add
like
to
to-
the detail.
I'd like to drive towards two things then that I'm not hearing yet. Could you explain why you can't raise the ground floor units another foot?
Yes, it's actually, and I asked for an explanation on this. Where's my binder?
Emily, if you don't mind jumping to sheet A18 or A18.1, those would be helpful for this discussion.
Yeah. And Ryan, if you're on, if you could raise your hand on Zoom and ask to be added as a participant. Yes, there you are. Do you want to try to field this so I don't totally mess it up?
As far,
It's
Can
an
you hear me?
engineering answer and he knows better than to let me give an engineering answer.
can you hear me?
Yes.
As far as raising the finished floor an extra foot, is this specific to just building 5?
No, to the whole development. It seems like it's the same
It's
question.
Specifically to building 2 and I think to building 5. Yeah,
Yes.
it's the 2 that are facing El Camino Real.
Yeah.
The requirement doesn't apply to the other 3 buildings.
Yeah. So I know that building 2 was a lot closer. I think we were a couple tenths off from the requirement, but what's challenging in maybe a grading plan or a site plan would be better to utilize this. But when we take the back of walk grade, and then we set that finished floor entry, the stoops, the steps, and we raise up. What's happening on the alley side of the project is the streets are going in the opposite direction. So what it does is maybe at one point at the building, you can create that step and it works. But as you go to the low point of the building, and I'll speak to building 5 in particular, the road is going to the south, whereas the grade in El Camino is going to the north. So we get this adverse relationship of pushing the building up from the back of walk along El Camino. But then when we need to catch back up on the street side, there's too great of a difference as you go through the entry, through the powder room, drop down to the 2-car garage, slope out the garage, and then get to the street. And where we were running into trouble was we would need physical risers that would be in the garage that would be encroaching into the minimum clearance space into the garage.
Okay, so that's not really an engineering explanation. You're just saying you don't have room for steps inside or you haven't accommodated them.
That's right. We don't have room for the steps inside unless we request a waiver. So it would be one of 2 waivers. It would either be a waiver to encroach into the garage space, or it'd be a waiver to reduce the height as we've done to not have the grade separation between the back of walk and the stoop.
And what is the, board member Rosenberg, what do you?
Oh, yeah, apologies for jumping in here. What is the difference that you were off by? maybe that's a question for,
No, I think we have it here. Building 2, we're
It's
0.2
like
feet short.
2/10. Yeah, it's
2
2/10.
tenths.
2/10 of an inch off,
2/10 of a
It's of a
foot.
foot.
2/10 of a foot.
Yeah, 2/10.
Okay, I was gonna
So
say
essentially
2/10 of an inch, I can sneeze and create that. 2/10 of a foot off,
Yeah.
okay.
And that's for building 2. And for building 5, we're a little over a foot short. Or and again, it varies along the building, so it's not consistent. So the most that we're off is 1.1 feet.
Understood, thank you.
So if I could, Mr. Hickey, you develop a lot of townhomes in the peninsula. Wouldn't you say that it's frequently a benefit to the residents to be somewhat elevated from the grade?
Actually, I don't know that it necessarily is. It really depends on the context. A lot of folks don't like having the steps up. It sort of depends on who they expect to have living there, whether they expect to have, a family member visiting frequently who.
If you lived in that ground floor bedroom and you were at grade with the sidewalk on El Camino, would you find that preferable to not having some grade separation?
Well, candidly, I don't think a foot would make a difference to me. And I also think that, I mean, I see where you're coming from, and I understand that different people might have different preferences. Personally, I would rely much more on landscaping than on grade separation, because as somebody who's a little over 6 feet tall, even a 3-foot difference in grade, it's not going to make a difference as I'm walking down the street.
Okay, I'm just trying to give you.
No, I appreciate that, and I understand. I understand the reason for the grade separation. I think that for certain people, that does give them a sense of a little bit more privacy. But that's also why we're trying to put the landscaping in, and why we don't build to the build 2 line in part, I think obviously we have constraints where we can't do it anyway, but I think that's actually ends up being a byproduct benefit for the site, and there's a little bit more room for landscaping in there. Plus, as you say, the front stoop is actually gives you a little bit of a sense of separation there too. It's not like some of the units along a little farther north in El Camino, where some of those Ricky's Hyatt's units, really, you walk out your front door and you're almost in the street.
Okay, so the reason though is not related to the overall height of the building or anything like that,
No.
not a code compliance issue. So it's
Right.
really, it sounds to me like it's an internal constructability stair plan arrangement.
Well, again, it's
Maybe
compliance with
construction
code.
feasibility.
It's one of the, as I say, it's one of the 2 things. We're either going to need to request an exception from the interior clear space requirement for the garage, because you'd have additional steps inside the garage, or we're going to need to request an exception for a waiver under the state density bonus.
Or you could design the building to meet the code and change it so that it does meet both requirements. Those are options. You would agree.
We believe that
Okay.
that's not
I'd
physically
like to-
possible given
I'd
what
like
we've
to go to
proposed.
my next question, please, and you don't need to be involved in this one, to the staff. We received a letter from a member of the public regarding a bicycle path. I had assumed that was something along El Camino where the sidewalks change in width.
No.
And I think I'm mistaken on that, but can you explain what the bicycle path is that the member of the public was talking about?
Yes, I can explain that. That comment arose from when a different project was proposed on this property and went to a council pre-screening. There is a bike lane multi-use path behind the Mountain View apartment. So interior kind of to that property. It's hard to see it in the plans because where it aligns is with that common use parcel on Cesano Court. And so it's actually slightly north of this project site and not shown on most of the site plans. I can pull it up in Google Maps if that would be helpful.
Can you go to
Or even if
A05? I think that
A05,
might be a
sure.
good way
I
to see
really,
it.
I really would like to understand what's going on with that.
And in that, one of the public comments we received yesterday, it
Go back
says,
to
see
A05.
attached map indicating the existing path with a line and the small circle indicating the missing connection. So that attachment, if you have that in the original email, I think that would be helpful
Clarify.
to understand that as well.
So that attachment was referring to the plans that were presented to the council pre-screening and not the plans that are presented to the ARB today.
Can you please zoom in on that center image? And we'll try and draw the map and see if we can explain why this is something that can't be tackled. Because again, this is something that we discussed at the pre-hearing meeting with staff, myself, and Vice Chair Chen. So if I'm understanding correctly,
That's the path right there.
that's the path.
Mhm.
Yes,
It's off
that's
the
correct.
property.
It's completely off the property.
You see that, Peter? And it
And
connects
does
up,
that path
connects
connect
up
to
to-
Cesano Court right now?
It does
No.
not, there's a fence.
and there's a
There's-
bridge
there's a
somewhere
fence right
across
here.
to Palo Alto that if you went to the other end of that whole bicycle path, but you need a study of that path itself.
It's the big fence on the backside of the site.
Backside of the
That's it.
property.
That fence is the
Not-
end of the bike
Not on the
path.
street side at all.
So my question to staff then is, I gather the answer is no to this, but does the applicant have any ability to control what happens in that funny curved sliver of land? It would obviously be better if they could get their street C to access Cesano Court there as well. But if it's not their land, there's not much
Not
anybody can do,
possible to
right?
deal with it for this project.
Has
Correct,
anybody
it's not
explored
Part
whether
of that property.
easements across that are possible? I mean, it's so clearly on a public benefit to use a piece of land that will never otherwise be used for their interest, for the bicycle path's interest.
It's owned by the condo HOA, so it's not,
Has anybody even asked the condo if that's viable to do anything with their land to mutual benefit?
Okay, so we, as I alluded to earlier, we actually, we developed the site adjoining the MV apartments. And
Right.
at the time, this was something that the city of Mountain View was really interested in as well. And so we spent a lot of time looking at this. The issue is that unlike most modern condominium projects where the common area is owned actually by the HOA and therefore managed by the board with, consent from the owners, the common area in this particular condominium is owned jointly by all 54 property owners. So the only way that you'd be able to get even an easement would be if you had all 54 of those property owners agree to it. So I think candidly, the only way that you're ever going to be able to get, practically speaking, the only way you're ever going to be able to get a connection point through to the street is if the city uses eminent domain. Because what's going to happen there, and we've already gotten this sort of preliminary feedback from talking with the board, there are concerns that from the Palo Alto Greens that if that pathway comes in, there will be a lot of bike traffic and other traffic, pedestrian traffic going through to the connection that's at the end of Cesano Court, that the bike bridge over there. So I'll tell you, there's at least one person, and since they all have veto power, there's at least one person at Palo Alto Greens who doesn't want it. And so I think the only way you'd be able to, practically speaking, get it is through eminent domain.
Well, that's a great explanation. Thank you. So my question comes back to staff then. Has anybody even considered that option, eminent domain, to get this as a public benefit? No. So it's just a total black hole.
so.
This is exactly what eminent domain laws are written for.
And I think that when it initially went to pre-screening, that separate application with different applicants was for a PHC project where public benefit can be taken more into consideration. But this is a streamlined housing project that, as long as it is consistent with code, must be approved.
Okay, so I have to say my questions have been answered. Thank you.
I have some other things to talk about here. Keep it on the light side. To the first one would be, we have a community here of a lot of kids. And so the public use spaces don't have any playground, any equipment, anything for children. Frequently you see the basketball hoops that are kind of pulled out from the garage fronts and they're played in the street. But it seems to me that 50% of their population are going to be children. And there really ought to be some landscape thought as to areas where, of course, preschool, kids could play equipment somehow. And perhaps you would give up on one of the outdoor cooking areas, you know, and make it into a sort of a area useful for toddlers and for the next stage somehow, some kind of a, you know, there's just going to be a lot of kids on this site and they need to be considered so they just don't have to play in the street. But I have much more serious question here is that looking at the whole project from the very beginning, and this takes us way back before any of the detailed questions that we've been asking, the whole area of the site is a 58,776 square foot site, which is an acre plus, you know, acre and a third. And it concerns me about the way in which a project like this is developed, especially because we have to consider housing element and the fact that we have over 5,000 housing units to be built in this town. And that would suggest that and if we look at our own requirements, that if it's over an acre, you really have to have two different types of housing typologies. That is a kind of a requirement in our code. I'm presuming, and maybe planning could answer the question if it's still there.
So
But the fact of the matter is, you know, I want to sort of preclude a potential answer here, is that you have two projects and that if you subtract the one from the other, you're less than an acre, but you know, you have to look at this as if it's one project. And so this goes back quite a ways in planning, accepting this project. Now, I just want to say that I think the project's really well done throughout, and you've had all the answers to any of the details that have been raised here, and there are a few left minor things to be dealt with in terms of the architecture that I can see. And this is going to be a very pleasant addition to the street. Although, in a way, El Camino really ought to be a different kind of street. It's not just a kind of, it's a semi-highway, to be honest. And so I'm concerned that pushing buildings that are just single entry buildings like this to the street edge is a question as to whether that was the right way to design El Camino Real from the very beginning. Can't go back and recreate it. You've done a very good job of saying the landscaping should be set back as your answer to the previous question about the height of the first floor. But personally, I sort of feel El Camino is a different street than residential streets that are like some of the residences you have in Mountain View, for example, which are also very nicely done. So taking a part of this and saying that it should in some way answer the issue of the requirement of the housing element. And it doesn't. It's about 30% reduction from the housing element requirements. Truth of the matter is, there should be more units on this particular site at that size. And I don't understand why that question wasn't asked earlier on by planning.
Hey, David, are we asking a question of planning? Or are we
Yeah,
making
that's the
comments at this
question
point? Okay.
to planning. I
Thank
just asked it, didn't I?
Thank you. I want to give them a chance to answer.
So two questions were asked. One was the housing typology question, and then the second was just the number of units question. And so in terms of housing typology, these are currently two separate parcels separated by a public street, and they will remain two separate parcels. And for that reason, when we're looking at the size of the lot for the purpose of providing housing typology, each of these lots is less than an acre, so one housing type was required per lot. And then secondly, in terms of the number of units assumed or anticipated by the housing element. That is a recommendation, but our housing element does include a buffer. And, the applicant can potentially also chime in on why this number of units was chosen, but certain elements like the size of the units, these units are family serving with 3 to 4 bedrooms, which, may serve the community in a different way than providing more but smaller units would.
Well, it seemed to me in looking at the site pretty carefully, it would have been reasonable to say, take one part of the parcel, right? I mean, you could have saved a certain percentage of the site. And the major units, the larger number, and the other site could have turned into a multiple dwelling. And obviously, these builders are very capable, developers are very capable of a development that would have solved the density problem, at least 80, 90% of it. And you didn't make a choice to do that. I would say that the smaller property could have easily accommodated a 5-story multiple dwelling and massively would relate to the neighbors pretty well. And could have been, and I would trust in the design of something like that could be well done. But it seems to me that the objective of the city, if it's going to be to answer the issue of the housing element, it really has to push in that direction on just about every project. Now, I know these folks are really good developers of townhomes, and they're really going to be quite incredible dwellings for people who move into them. But I think that the other objective should be to answer the question of the housing element and push towards smaller apartments. After all, the 2.3, I think, is the average size of a family these days. So having large 3-bedroom units like this, it's a luxury, and I don't think it will be affordable by an awful lot of people in this community or who we want to live here. In particular, of course, if you had more units, you'd have more affordable apartments. I don't have to be the one who speaks for that because there's so many people out there who are saying that is what Palo Alto needs desperately.
I would like to jump in here, if that's all right, David, and I do want to cover the exterior facades of the building as well.
That's a good point. Now, I think that if you want to talk about
If that's all
detail
right.
again. that's
Yeah, I
fine.
want to jump back to detail because I do think that your conversation as the high level scope is sort of a bigger conversation, but I guess the question for the applicant and for staff would be, are they compliant with what they've designed? And as far as my understanding is the answer is yes. It's a personal choice what they choose to develop. And then we can have an internal discussion as to whether or not we think it's appropriate for the site. But I do want to sort of take a step back and make sure that we've covered all of the points.
Can I
On
just
those, please, go
interrupt you
ahead.
I just want to make one final statement. It appears that we are not voting on this in any way. But I want to register my opinion that for the purposes of appropriate planning for Palo Alto housing, I have to vote against this project only because it doesn't answer the issues that I addressed before, that it should have had a multiple dwelling building across the street on the smaller lot, and it would have been very well designed and solved a lot of the housing problems that we need here.
But again, David, they're not outside of compliance. Right, so that's the personal opinion of you.
Yeah, no,
at
they
this
are
point.
outside of the zoning requirement that we have in our code that says you have to have 2 building types on a property that is greater than 1 acre.
But you asked
And
that of
this
Emily.
project is greater than 1 acre. It is 1 project. It isn't 2 projects.
I would argue, David, that because of the way that it is 2 separate parcels And how often do we ask that, when we're seeing these big multiple buildings, and I apologize to the chambers here, we're getting into a little bit of a discussion and getting away from questions. But I think this is an important point because it is a big scope of this project, is that these are technically two separate parcels. So they do not have to comply with that. In addition to that, how many times have we seen one small townhouse, and we wish that they had, worked with the site next door. We wish that the large apartment building had worked with the site next door so they could get a thoroughfare for their trash collection so that they could do that. And again, apologies for getting away from questions here, but I think that this is, if they're in compliance, at that point, it becomes your opinion, what you think should be done at the
I
site.
don't accept your opinion.
That's fine, but that's where I stand as well. So I think that if they're in compliance,
I
if they've
don't
conformed with
accept it.
that.
We have to take a larger view. We're responsible equally. I wanted to actually ask the question. PTC, have they, could you report on what happened at PTC?
This is a streamlined housing development project. This is a study session with the ARB, and this is the only
I
public hearing
understand.
for this project.
But am I allowed to ask the question? What happened at PTC?
There was no PTC. This is the only public hearing for this project.
I'd be curious to know how they looked at it. Then just making the point. Now, Emily, I think, frankly, very good review of the project in terms of understanding the detail of it and presenting it. But I do question the end of the book that says that this project is less than an acre. And on page page 50, item 6B5, diversity of housing types,
Apologies, could you say again which packet page you're looking at?
packet page
50?
50.
Yeah, packet page 50
Thank
is the checklist item that we're discussing,
Yep.
where it talks about the different typologies. I think the reason that we do have the one hearing before the ARB, even though these are mostly ministerial projects, we do want to make sure that staff is interpreting these checklist items appropriately, and that we're giving the developer a chance to make any necessary changes. So it is good that we're having this discussion. I don't know if we need a straw poll that confirms that staff has interpreted this properly.
I guess the question would be, these are technically two separate parcels, correct?
They are separated by a public street, correct?
Okay. And because of that, it does mean that they are each less than 1 acre.
Correct.
And so while we are looking at this holistically as how they all tie together, because they are being developed by the same developer, they are technically two separate projects.
No,
They are two separate legal parcels, and that's the way that we were interpreting the code, yes.
No, I mean, if there's a difference of opinion, that's one thing, but if there's a set rules that they're following, then we need to know that. Peter, do you want to chime in?
Board Member Rosenberg, are we actively discussing this as an issue now, or do you want to finish the
Let's not-
questioning round?
I mean-
I would love to talk about this, but I don't want to interrupt your process.
No, understood. It's the thing is that I actually am a little bit disappointed that this wasn't brought up as the first thing. So if you had a question about something this high level on this project, you should have brought it up first, because we're sitting here getting into the weeds on details when, if you're sitting here in the back pocket saying, I don't think any of this should be built, that should be the first thing on that table. So for future reference, for future meetings, I do think it is important. If you have a high level fundamental disagreement with a project, bring it up first. So this goes to all the board members for future projects.
I think
So since we're here, I apologize. We will put aside the exterior elevation commentary for a moment. I would like to get into this now, because if this is a fundamental issue, if this project cannot be built for some reason, or if there's a major issue with the actual overall scheme of this project, why are we talking about color boards?
Sure.
So let's get into it.
Just based on just the language of this, the objective standard. that says a diversity of housing types, detached units, attached, blah, 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 are required for projects on larger lots. And I think the lots is the question in hand.
Correct.
Because technically, the applicant could have submitted two separate projects for this, for efficiency and all the variety of reasons, you've submitted as one application, but it's two separate lots. Are we parsing words on what the lot means in terms of an application?
Would we rather see this come back as two separate projects?
I would rather see the planning staff be more aggressive promoting overall city policies and objectives. And this is where I'll address the folks at the planning and the new members here as well, that it's clearly debatable whether you consider this as one project or two lots, one project and two lots, or two projects, however you want to parse it. There's some grounds for variation here. The staff has never enforced this particular aspect of our objective standards about varying typologies, and developers obviously don't want to build two completely different buildings here. What Board Member Hirsch is saying is 100% correct. We need more housing in Palo Alto. We need to get to our full housing complement. This building is only 70% of it. Why not? Why haven't we pushed them harder to do more? This is one tool the planning department could use to get greater density of housing, and I think they should be making every effort to do that. I feel the same thing about the bicycle path. It's a real shame that we can't have a continuous bike path because a few residents are blocking it. And planning staff probably doesn't have the bandwidth or the appetite, but it's what they should be doing. That's what the city wants and needs. And instead, we're parsing details and being super legalistic about what the codes mean rather than planning for the future. Planning would mean, let's find a way to get that bike path to go through. Now's the opportunity to get the applicant to help us to do it. Clearly, the applicant has good reasons why they're not doing it, which we can't disagree with. At the same time, let's use the bully pulpit we have. Let's use the leverage as an applicant getting permits to get a few things that really count. Higher density, bike paths, those are basic. We consistently push for those things. So I completely agree with the gist of what Board Member Hirsch is saying. I also agree with Board Member Rosenberg, who says, look, we're here to review a project for our particular standards, and we'll do that. I don't vote against this because I disagree with high-level planning decisions, but I'd also want to point out, we're not at a high level planning, we're reacting. We should be planning for these things.
I just have to add something which I didn't really mention. What is on my mind is that the larger number of units that you get in, especially in the multiple dwelling, the greater the possibility you're going to get supportive housing of some sort, affordable housing. And that, there's been a crying concern that we get a larger number of lower income people into buildings like this. So the more smaller units you have, the more opportunity you'll have to satisfy more of that need. And you'll need to do that. It is a requirement of the state to provide for that. So we are now kind of giving it up, and there's a very minor amount of adjustments being made for people who could afford to buy into this project.
I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to make again, I apologize to the applicant that we're sort of pausing the questions for a moment, having a bit of an internal discussion on this. I actually feel very strongly that this is an extremely appropriate site for townhouses. I think it's right down the street from the sweet shop, which is a nice place for the kids to go. I think that we need more family-oriented housing. We have seen building after building after building on San Antonio and on El Camino that are, 200 plus units of studio apartments and one bedroom, and maybe you get a 2-bedroom. Townhouses provide the opportunity for families to be here. We have a hotel to the left, a hotel across the street, apartments to the right. I think we need, when we're talking about this variety of housing on an acre parcel to 2-acre parcel, the point of that is that we have multiple types of families and multiple types of low-income housing. We already have the apartment complexes. They're coming up and down El Camino and San Antonio left and right. When was the last time we looked into this townhome? Right? And this is the perfect opportunity for a townhome. It's a quirky site that has bisected into 2 lots already.
Well,
I don't know, Kendra, you're right next door to a 5-story apartment building. Every other
Exactly.
building on El Camino is 5 stories.
Right.
Putting
And then-
townhouses on El Camino is questionable, in my opinion.
And I would
in this day and
disagree. I
age.
think that this is one of
Okay,
those
so we
perfect
disagree on
sites
that.
for it because of the
No.
fact that when you zoom out and you look at the back, you keep going down Cezanne Court, it's single-family homes.
We need more density.
Understood, but
Townhouses
this
can
is,
provide.
this is a weird, what are you gonna do on this lot? You're gonna put a 6-story apartment complex on that left little sliver of land? Or are you gonna put 6
No.
townhouses and call it a day?
no, you could easily get a 5-story building, and it's the same as the other side of this property, as Peter just pointed out. And the housing that is being built here right now, well designed to actually extend much more vertical than many townhouse projects that you can see in this city and in Mountain View. It has height as, if you look at the elevation, it's pretty clear. It's almost as high as the building next door. And they have extended the roof up to sort of fit into to that. So if we had what has been kind of the latest height factor for construction along El Camino, certainly. We've seen it in other places, such as the Charities project that we've approved.
So let me ask you this, if this property was part of the building next door, when Summerhill Homes built the Mountain View one, you demand 2 types of typology, correct? You would
Yes.
demand that there are townhomes
Yes.
and a building.
Mhm.
And now this small parcel that is too small to be counted as needing multiple types of housing, you guys actually want to just convert it to a massive building with one typology. So I'm getting a bit frustrated and confused by the argument that this needs 2 types of typology, but in fact, you don't actually want 2 types of typology of housing. You want a different type. You want the super high density. And my argument is that if this was combined with that Summerhill's home next door, you'd need the apartment complex and you need the townhomes. My argument here is that these townhomes are great in this area because it's creating more of a mixture of who's living there, of who can afford to live there, of what types of families, what types of people are living in this area. So my argument is very strongly that I think this is absolutely appropriate there because of the fact that there's already an apartment complex next door, because of the fact that there's single-family homes just down the street. We want the mixture of typology. I think that putting another apartment complex in there that's small and has studio apartments is not going to be helpful for diversifying the neighborhood. And I feel very strongly about this.
I'm
And I
kind
think
of with,
I'd love to hear the other board members' opinions.
yeah, and I'm kind of with Board Member Rosenberg on this, in that this development, whether it's over an acre, one way to think about it, or under, it is a typology that makes sense in this area. Yes, it's on El Camino, but with Cezanne Court and the duplexes and the back apartments next door, it is providing a mix of housing types in this small area within the overall streetscape of El Camino. And yes, you can have 2-bedroom townhouses, but it's townhouses in a way is about having space for families, having 3 to 4 bedrooms. 4 bedrooms may be a little large, but there's mix of 3 to 4. And that makes for a variety of family types, including multi-generational family types, to be able to live here. And having, some of the units have first floor bedroom, bathroom that could even be rented out. And that really makes for a really larger mix of family types that can be in this, within a 1 mile radius of this site. And then the other point of is it hitting the housing element unit numbers? It is not, the buffer that it's using is more than the percentage of buffer. So I do it, in terms of how many units this is providing compared to the housing element recommended number. It's the percentage, I think it's building about 30% less than the housing element number, but you don't have a 30% buffer in the housing element, so it is taking a larger bite out of the buffer than the ratio that this is providing. So I do have a little bit of, not totally in agreement of, there's a buffer and it's going to make up for it. But I think for what this project is providing, other than all of massing and other issues that I do want to get into, I don't think arguing, is this the right type of development, is going to push the need for housing forward in Palo Alto.
Yeah, well, I understand the needs that we need more units in town, but for this project, I do appreciate the developers think to develop it as townhomes because it's a nice area with a mixture of the different typology. And also, I think for the smaller units and versus the townhomes, they're kind of like two totally different group of people. For smaller units, it's more like for the younger ones, younger professionals, while the townhomes with three bedrooms or 4 bedrooms is for the growing families with kids. So while we need more units in town, we need to also balance the needs for different groups of people, whether it's for families or individuals. So I think it's a good balance. And we actually, during our past year, all the projects that we reviewed, I can see there are lots of big complex with smaller units, like 1 apartment or studio projects coming in front of us. And for townhome like this, I think it's a good balance for what we lack for the overall planning in town.
Well, I appreciate your other opinions. I think that it's important to keep this in mind. I didn't really honestly expect that anything would change today. I didn't expect that there would be a kind of agreement from just anybody in particular to make this kind of a change. But I think we need to be more aware of the opportunity we have to, and it changes our architecture, by the way. It's going to really affect our architecture because we need to mix it up more. We really need to work with a variety of densities and so on and see how they actually relate to each other. I don't find it to be scary to develop a multiple dwelling, because all of a sudden it's going to look different, massively different. I don't think it's necessarily the case. I think multiple dwellings mixed in with residences of this nature could work quite well, as a piece of architecture. And socially, I think it's significant. I think that we need to push in this direction. And, I note that nobody else thought through this process here. And I think we should have look at the site and see that possibility. Frankly, I think the smaller site could lend itself very nicely to a nice looking multiple dwelling. And it would be a kind of an interesting mixture. And I want to point out that actually the project that is on this site at the back side is made up of condominium units and individual houses. So the two have been mixed already on this site. And it almost leads you to think, well, why don't we continue the same way? The same developers actually did both parts at different times in the history of Palo Alto here.
Chair, if I may. I think it's been a really good discussion about the need for housing in the city of Palo Alto. I think we all know that we have a housing element that is asking us to allow development of over 6,000 units. And we're all doing our level best to get there over the next many years that we have. However, the housing element does have a buffer for reasons such as this. And staff is very mindful when we're using that buffer. We're tracking those numbers. And with each project, we're talking to developers, making sure, can they add additional units to get us closer to those numbers? All those sorts of conversations are happening. But I think for the moment, you have a project before you where staff has interpreted the code to say that there are 2 lots, and each of those lots is under an acre, and therefore only one housing type is required. And so if there's any disagreement on that, we'd like to understand that. But if there's just a desire to maybe change that objective standard, then I think we need to table that for another hearing.
Thank you, Jody.
Well, then I'll just voice my objection to this being called 2 separate projects. I think it's obviously one project, one kind of design concept that's being used effectively, but nonetheless, it's one project. It is one project, not 2.
Okay. At this time, I would like to get back on track to questions to the applicant, questions to staff in regards to the architecture itself and the overall aesthetic of the buildings as they have been presented. I'd like to make sure everyone's seen the material boards. I'd like to dive into the exterior elevations this time and see how everyone's feeling about those, specifically along El Camino and on how they relate to Cesano Court. So does someone want to start us off?
I have no more questions, so.
Okay, no more questions. Any other questions?
I do have some clarifying questions regarding massing and finishes.
Perfect. Let's dive into that.
So we have 3 separate boards and 3 separate, images of boards as well on the drawing set. They are very similar in terms of, the color schemes. I'd like to understand from the applicant, particularly the architect, on the logic and the strategy to why 3 and why these 3.
So overall, we wanted to create a cohesive look for the 5 buildings on site, but we wanted them to be distinct from one another, and all within the same color palette. So that, again, they were slight distinctions, but that they were cohesive together.
So do you feel like this provides enough distinction? Like if I flip from one building set to another, like I have to kind of compare, and similarly on the boards here, to like, what's the difference? Do you feel like it's a strong enough difference to justify 9 different about 9 different stucco colors in this one development?
Sorry, I just want to pull these up in my packet here. And so the body colors are used on the stucco and on the siding. So it's a mix between those colors and those different materials. And yes, we do believe it's providing the differentiation that we were looking for.
Okay, and in terms of, did you consider, I'm sure you did, like some more punchier accent colors to, again, you're trying to build, I forget, 29 different units for families to have some distinction of their house versus the next person. But I guess my point is, yes, there's difference, but there's so similar that it kind of feels like an apartment building with a few different paint colors of very similar tones.
So we did make the decision to not do individual units their own color scheme, that it is designed as one building, and that the color schemes are per building. We have done projects before where we've done different colored entry doors in that same overall building color scheme concept that we could explore.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. because we're the developer, she can't make all the decisions for us, but yes, it's something we look at actually in most of our projects. We take a look, okay, what happens if we color block them more as individual units? What happens if we try to have more of a cohesive whole? And in this case, when we looked at it, we actually preferred the look that we have now. It's a really subtle balance. I mean, and we know we're not going to please everybody. We know that there isn't a solution that's going to please everybody when it comes to color. We have this ongoing discussions in the office that, first of all, you got to look at the color chips. You can't rely on the prints, right? You got to look at the color chips, and you got to look at them in multiple different types of daylight. Can't look at them indoors. You got to look at them outdoors, and you got to look at them in different lights. And it's funny. There are colors that we think that look almost identical sometimes in certain lights. And then we get out in a different light, and we see them as very different colors. And there are other colors that look quite different, and then they look more similar. And so in this case, I mean, we're, as I said at the very beginning, we welcome feedback. You know, if there's a clear direction here from the board today, we'd very much like to hear that. We have looked at it. This is not something that we just threw in and then walked away from. This is something that we do consider as we're looking at a project, and we will continue to look at it if there are suggestions.
And can you add to this, like what scheme is for what building? Because I can't even keep track of that. from the
Yeah,
drawing
actually,
set.
if you look at A23, 23.1 and 23.2, it actually says on the lower left which scheme this applies to. So for example, scheme 1, which is on A23, is on buildings 2 and 4, which would be one of the buildings on the smaller parcel facing El Camino, and building 4 is the building that faces towards the MV apartments. If you look at scheme 2, that's 1 and 5. So you would see, if you're on the El Camino frontage, you will see scheme 1 and scheme 2. You'll see scheme 1 for building 2, and you'll see scheme 2 for building 5. And then scheme 3 applies to building 3. So that's a different look as you're looking along Susana. So you're getting variation as you're moving around the site, but we really, especially since the site is broken up into 2 different lots, we definitely wanted to have some sort of cohesive whole. That was the design intent.
Okay. Another question about finishes. There's this lovely page with all these perforated metal panels.
Can you tell me what sheet that is?
L 9.2. Can you explain where these are supposed to go? And are they're not on the finished board, so I didn't know what pattern was selected and for where.
Yeah, I'll have Roman speak to that. He can talk about the particular locations. You can sort of see on L 9.2 where one of those will go, but.
So if you go back to the overall rendered site plan, there's a call out for it. Let's see, hold on one moment. Sorry, some of the sheets. That's okay. Actually, if we go to L-2.2, the enlargement, where it says dining lounge, we have the metal panels in that location behind the barbecue. And the pattern of those perforated panels are shown on the enlarged image sheet. L-9.2.
So the intended pattern is kind of a gradation that's shown on the elevation. Not either of the other images, it's just for idea. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
so the elevation, it shows dining lounge title, that's the pattern. And I believe the same pattern is above as an example. It would transition from more open opaque to opaque at the bottom as shown on the elevation. And just the image off to the right-hand side, that's just to show what more or less the perforated panel product, yes.
And I have thank you so much for this. And a question for the architect, going back to the roof schemes and all these slopes and all that. My question is regarding the rooftop decks. That railing, I'm going to sheet, say just 16.4, for instance. Each unit has a rooftop deck with this, looks like a horizontal slat balcony edge. What is that material, and is that also turning the corner when you're separating between units?
It's not turning the corner. If you're looking at the 16.4 like that you referenced, you see the right elevation. It's actually the horizontal siding, and that just has to do with how it interfaces with the roof. If you're looking at the right elevation, you can see it on the top there at the deck. So it's horizontal slats along the rear piece of the deck, and then as it turns the corner, it transitions to a horizontal siding, and that's just because it's not able to have the railing there, the slat railing, as it's going up perpendicular to the roof slope.
And if I may, this may be part of your question. That's on the outside and between units, because we want to have privacy between the units. It's actually, it doesn't turn there either. What is this here? This is, doesn't that go to a full? Yeah. Oh, okay. So basically, no, it doesn't turn the corner between the units because there's actually a wall between the units.
And how high is that wall? Like if I go to page 15, I can't tell if it's railing or wall.
In most cases, it's the penthouse for the stairwell.
No, like beyond the penthouse for the stairwell, you have two lines.
So that would be like a 4-foot high wall.
So you can look from one balcony to the next.
Correct, yeah.
And like right where the cursor is in that slot, you would see from one balcony to the next 4 feet high, but in between you have a sloping down roof in between. Is that correct?
I can't see what, is it, are you looking at between unit 4 and 2, for example?
Let's say between unit 1 and 3 on our screen right now. Like here and here is.
Yes, that
4
is the
foot.
roof. That's the roof sloping down at 3 and 12.
So if I'm sitting here and my neighbor is sitting here, they're, practically sitting next to each other, and then even more person here and a person there are in 2 separate unit balconies.
Yes, yes.
And if I may, we recognize where this question is going, and it's a tough one, right? We think about this too, because on the one hand, you want to have the privacy, and you do have that because that is just that's not the full deck. You do have certainly a much more private space. On the flip side, we could put up potentially some sort of screen there. The downside is how that looks. Sometimes that isn't necessarily a great look, and so we're trying to, again, strike a balance on it. I'm just spitballing here, but I wonder if we could even use a screen that's similar to something that we're using in the landscape screening.
Pretty sure we have in our objective standards pretty clear guidelines on what we would like to see in Palo Alto, which is anything below 5 feet needs at least a 50% transparency. I remember we went through this in great detail a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of guidelines for what Palo Alto would like to see. Whether you choose to, again, do it your own way and get a waiver is obviously up to you.
Yeah, that wasn't identified as something in that would require a waiver, but we can certainly check with staff on that. And if it's something that, as I say, if it's something that requires a more screening than we're currently providing, I don't currently see a reason why we wouldn't be able to provide that.
It would be straightforward in this case.
Yeah, and it seems like most of these balconies have a roof over it as well. It's hard to tell from, there's not a clear section through these balconies. And the reason I bring this up, other than just trying to understand this, is I used to live in a townhouse too. You kind of feel like it's almost like a private home, right? And then you're up on the balcony and you're 2 feet away from your next door neighbor. So I think in terms of like just how the person and the family living there, how do they enjoy their outdoor space and their next door adjacencies? I think that's something that I would recommend you look into more and provide that privacy that you're providing throughout the house, but then you go to the balcony and the next door neighbor who can be smoking out there and your children can't play in their terrace.
We appreciate that. Yeah, we'll definitely take a look. I think that's a good suggestion.
I think that's all my questions about finishes and materials.
Does anyone else have any questions for the applicant? Okay, at this time, I think we will thank you for your time.
Thank you
efforts.
very much. I
may
appreciate the
Have a
questions.
seat and we'll close the discussion, excuse me, we'll close the comment portion of the meeting and we'll turn it over to the ARB for an internal discussion.
Can we take a 2-minute break?
Yeah, why don't we go ahead? It is 10:53. Let's take a 5-minute break. We'll meet back here in about 5 minutes. Everyone can get a coffee, use the restroom. Thanks very much. All right, I'd like to call back to order the Architectural Review Board meeting. Thank you guys for your patience while we took a quick break. At this time, we will be doing final comments from the ARB. I'd like to go down each person, and I would ask that we each try and keep our thoughts somewhat concise. I'm going to try and keep us all at 5 minutes per person, just so we can provide some comprehensive, cohesive feedback to the applicant. And yeah. Board Member Adcock, would you like to kick us off?
Well, thank you for your patience through our pretty long hearing for this project. And thank you for your presentation. I think like I said before, it's a type of housing we need in Palo Alto for families to be able to afford living here. I know it's going to cost more than a studio apartment, but for families, we need townhouses, and let's face it, single family homes in Palo Alto is not affordable for majority of the people. And so as far as the overall design layout, I think it's the frontage on El Camino is quite nice. I'm not so sure you need this many colors and variety, but I would love to see a little bit of accent color, whether it's, the usual trick of doors or the front porches, to have a bit more than grays. I mean, I'm all for grays for most things I do, but I think to be a family home, it needs a little bit more color. As far as the fake dormer, extremely disappointed that it's a fake window. It's, I would say either don't have it, or if you have it, I think there are ways to work with it sectionally to make it a wonderful, bring light into that stairwell. If not, just don't do it. It's not adding enough interest to your elevation to make it worthwhile. And as we did not really address the obscure glazing and the requirements for privacy on the Mountain View side. And there's no landscape screening on that side either. I think for planning staff, I would recommend looking into that a little bit more, even if it's, some screens with some vine growth, something to give that side some greenery when you look out instead of looking straight into the units across the way. Yes, it's 30 feet, but with no screening and, 10 feet from your fence line, it feels like it'll feel like a back alley with nothing. So that's for planning staff, I would recommend you push that a little bit further. And for the individual units, I think back to like what Peter had brought up earlier, as far as the step, I feel like there's enough space in your layouts to have a step between the garage and the first level to elevate the floor a little bit. Unlike you, I'm only 5 feet tall, and I think it makes a difference to have an extra foot. 5'1" to be more precise. But yeah, I'm down here, you're up there, and you kind of, I think that elevation is important in that, for especially some of the units, you have a bedroom right on the first floor by the street. I think that makes a huge difference. I would really recommend pushing, being able to achieve that. And I just looking at the plans, it doesn't look like it takes a lot to be able to elevate that. Waivers are easy, but it makes a difference. I think I don't really feel like there's not much we can do with this application, but I am also very disappointed about that bike path. I think it's a small gap in that bike route that, it's like, it affects so many people. We're trying to make Palo Alto, Mountain View more bikeable, more pedestrian friendly, and just having a dead end in that bike path right by this site seems like a really lost opportunity that could benefit, other than the 29 families here, hundreds and thousands of people. So overall, I think it's a great project and we need the housing. I would just recommend taking some of our comments to heart. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to jump over to Board Member Hirsch if he's ready. That's okay. I don't want to put you on the spot. We can also go to Board Member Chen or Board Member
No,
Balti.
that's okay.
Okay.
I'll give it a try. So on the privacy issue, I just want to point out that the Project Alma Court, I don't know if you know about it, but the areas between it and its neighboring houses, which are single-family residences right nearby, there's I think it's a fence with planting on it, that goes up pretty high, and it's a tight space, as is this one. And, so the kind of planting that you suggest for that is going to be significant. It creates a kind of a wall of green possibility that would separate you certainly from a first floor entry area. So it's possible to do it without a lot of kind of space on the ground to take away from the minimal amount of front yards that are there. Also, they have they really take advantage of their space. If you take a look at it, by creating a pretty narrow walkway and a stepped up raised entry area with a dining deck, et cetera, all sorts of little stuff happening very tight in a very tight space like that. So, just to sort of focus your eye on that really carefully to know how to do it. I want to repeat my request for consideration of children's play equipment of some sort that I think is significant for you to think about, that the amount of outdoor cookout that you have relative to the need for children's play. I think it's correct to say that it's a waste to not use those windows up at the top as a kind of a light well for the stairwell. There's some way of doing that so that you get the light to penetrate through. And it's a space that's raised up in some way so the light comes in. It seemed like it's there, the windows are there. It's a shame not to be able to use them. And in terms of the deck and the privacy of the two decks next to each other, I think that obviously you're going to work on that idea anyhow. I suppose the step-up elevation for the first floor, maybe it's carried all the way out to your step into the privacy area itself of the front of the house. Might be worth it, to carry it out into the sort of the area that's in front of the house, so that the area that becomes private is even further out and defined by a step up. I'm not sure if I sort of have all that in mind, but it's a kind of a detailing. And I really appreciate your comments about the office staff, the way they looked at the project and the colors, et cetera. And I think I'm very happy with all that. I think the subtle differences are really great here, and the scale changes are really interesting. And I think you'd really spend a lot of time on that. I haven't been talking about the aesthetics on the project except now, but I think you've done a really good job with that. Maybe some subtle front door color changes might be worthwhile to create the individual door, that gets you into your apartment. But the idea of the subtle mix of the whole structure, I think, is really well done. I think, there's been a lot of discussion about the trees, and of course the utilities and the trees have to be kind of coordinated. So whether we lose one or not, shouldn't really tie you up so much that you're kind of trying to figure out how to get the other tree in there. I think you've done it by having the trees set back a little bit where you couldn't use them on the street edge. And it's better to keep keep that entry to the street open feeling in any case, so your vision is clear as to somebody coming in, coming out of that one in-out connection to this whole little community, which is increasing in population quite a bit, so that safety gets to be a pretty big concern there. And having that vision down the street is important to know, the traffic that comes in a rush when the light changes, you know. As to the bike path, I don't know what you can do. It seems like it's something that you're dealing with all of those people in the other condo, and I don't see how you can quite solve it. And I don't think it's your responsibility to figure out bike paths that connect up different communities here. Specifically, if it's not even on the property of this project, so it seems to me to be one of those in unsolvable problems. So I don't want to really speak to it, because once you get through on the bike path, you know, you have to go through the rest of that property as well to get to the extension of it. And the other thought would be that there's going to be a bike path on El Camino, you know. So, but where do you go? How do you connect to it? It's sort of, you would have to pull the units in somehow and get people out to the street itself, you know, and that seems to me to be a hard problem. I'm not too concerned about the side elevations, the way they, you know, the amount of glazing in the sides. I don't mind if the buildings become a little more solid. They seem pretty well defined on the street side itself. So, but generally speaking, I think it's an elegant project, you know, even though I disagree with the use of the smaller site. It would have been a big change for you guys in this case, but I'm glad to make you developers who are important to Palo Alto and to the whole area of the Silicon Valley here, you know, aware of the need for multiple dwellings and, you know, solving the problem of housing for people who can't afford these. Somebody made a statement of this is a way for somebody to get an individual dwelling. Well, it cost a lot of money to build it, and you're going to have to charge an awful lot to sell these. So it doesn't really provide housing for a lot of the population that we need to solve here in Palo Alto. So I leave with that comment and hope that as very significant developers in the area, you'll give some thought to participating in this in some way on the next project.
Thank you, David. Board Member Balta, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for this application. It's a well put together set of drawings and design, and I appreciate all the thought that's gone into it. It's one of the best townhouse projects as far as an application goes that I've seen. I'm going to keep my comments to reacting to how you're complying with our objective standards, and I agree with most of what staff has put forth as far as what's missing or what's complying. There's two items that I'd like to see considered more. One of them is the question of privacy adjacent to the apartments along the Mountain View border. And I think there the best solution is to get greater landscaping, but to staff, I think requesting them to put translucent glazing on the windows there is an extreme difficulty for the residents. Those units only have windows on this elevation. And that would be, I just think it'd be unfair. The apartment next to them is full of windows and outdoor balconies. And our objective making those standards was more to protect single family residents than it is apartment building to apartment building, which is the case here. So I would like to see greater landscaping efforts made. But beyond that, I just don't think it's appropriate to get them to do privacy screens only on one side. The second question is regarding the ground floor elevation, and there I feel fairly strongly that they can and they should meet our objective standard regarding the height of ground floor units. It's not much in this case. It just requires a little more complexity of construction. And I believe, as Board Member Adcock said, that you have room to get the stairs or the steps inside there. And it'll just make for a better unit, better for the people along the town, just to have greater privacy, especially along El Camino. I don't think it's a big ask, and I think it's important. So staff, don't let them tell you it's not possible. It's quite possible. And so I'd like to see that happen. I'm really disappointed to see the fake roof dormers. To me, it just feels like somebody taking my hand when I'm designing and stabbing it. And it's just not necessary. It makes the building look overly complex from the outside. I think it's a detriment to the design. On the interior, of course, if you could make tall vaulted space with clear story windows and whatnot, that'd be really dramatic. You're going to bump into Palo Alto's FAR counting 2-story spaces twice. It's going to get worse and worse. You've got a lot of waterproofing challenges to build it the way it is. I would just eliminate them. I don't think it's doing it for you. As I looked at the roof form more, as my colleagues asked questions, I think the actual roof forms are just overly complex. You have too many different slopes. You have too many hip roofs and gable ends. I think the architect would appreciate a chance to just have one more go around, try to clean it up a little bit and keep it tighter. It's great that you have separate roof pieces for each unit and break it up. That part really helps the massing. But you could simplify the form, save yourself quite a bit of money on the construction, and it will look better. Don't forget, you don't see buildings as we see elevations on paper. Those dormers are probably not even going to be seen, at least not from this side of El Camino. Each one has got to cost you $50,000. It's just not worth it. Put the money into figuring out how to get the ground floor units higher. You'll be better off on that. We haven't discussed this at all, but I think the window detailing is missing. I'd recommend you consider putting stronger trim pieces around groupings of windows, say on the plastered elevation of the facade where you have 2 or 3 stories of windows together. That will couple with my comment about the colors of the building. Certainly they meet the standards, but they're really boring. It's just sort of meh. And I think what Board Member Adcock was saying, you could spice it up, put some accents in there. Don't be afraid to punch it up a little bit. Maybe that would combine with some trim, a bolder trim around something, a door. And again, it feels to me like your architect just hasn't had enough time to think it through once more as you go through this. But you can't object to the colors. They work well together. It's a quality composition with good materials. But you could do one more round of looking at it and make it that much better. Overall, it's a good project, and I think it should go forward, of course. But let's try to get the ground floor up and get rid of those roof dormers. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Balte. Vice Chair Chen.
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. I think overall the site plan is successful and you fit as many townhomes as you can on the site while still providing a very good size of gathering space. So I think the site plan is really good. As far as the materials and color selection, I think they are also very, very carefully selected. It stands out from the neighboring white apartment buildings and hotels, while the colors you choose are still compatible with its surroundings. Speaking of the waivers you requested, I think I don't have too much concern about the windows along the building floor facing the apartment buildings, and agree that we should not ask them to have the obscure glass on that side, and landscaping could help. But for waiver number 5, to reduce the height of the ground floor finish, as the other board member mentioned, I think that is something you can solve and raise it up, because it will, even a few inches up, it will help increase the sense of privacy. And other things, I think I would suggest you to work on the left elevation of building 3 to have the horizontal variations, and I think it should not be that hard. And considering the fake dormers, Yeah, I have the same feelings as the others. While I appreciate the roof variations you're trying to achieve, but those fake dormers just doesn't look good, and it just kind of like a waste of volume for this building. And as board member Bolte just mentioned, I would also encourage you to simplify your roof line to make the construction, everything is much simple. And also considering the privacy between the units, I would suggest you to add some taller screening between the units on the rooftop. Overall, yeah, I think it's a very good, very nice design project, and thank you so much for your efforts.
Thank you, Board Member Chen. All right, so to summarize, I think we've got quite a bit of agreement on a lot of these items. The ground floor really needs to be reevaluated. The privacy screen does not seem to be too much of an issue for most of the board members. I also am a big believer that you can do a lot with curtains. And maybe that's part of the actual item that you include with your construction instead of leaving it up to the homeowners at future time. I actually would also like to echo Board Member Hirsch's commentary about the play structure. I think that having that would be a huge benefit to this property. I understand the barbecues are great, everyone loves them, but there's also some nice areas that could be considered. There's a small triangular patch that's a little bit too close to El Camino for my liking, but it's a potential area for some outdoor space as well. So just to take a second look and see if there's the potential that maybe one of the barbecues could be moved to the triangular area, but finding a space for a bit more of a family play. These are family-oriented units that should be family-oriented outdoor spaces as well. Overall, I just wanted to say that I also agree actually with the roofs. I think that they're quite chaotic, and I would definitely take a reevaluation of that and just clean them up. It's sort of a simplification, tidying them up a little bit. They're a little overworked, and I think that you guys have really good potential there, but that's my biggest complaint about the exteriors is the roofs. It seemed to be a split vote on the color schemes. 2 said they were kind of dull and 2 said they were quite nice. I'm actually going to be on the side of, I think they're quite nice, but I can understand the concern that they're maybe a little bit too muted. I would encourage the idea of maybe the doors themselves or something a little bit more exciting. And so that each person, as they're walking down, they're not being in the dark, being like, wait, which one's mine? Is it this one or that, right? Giving a little bit more variation so people can identify their own homes. I also agree with the bike pathing. I think that that's a wonderful and admirable thing that is not part of this application. So I would like to review that at a future date if possible with staff, but it, in my mind, is just unrelated to this project, unfortunately. As much as we would like to have it be part of this, it's not even on your property. Overall, I think the location is great. I was pretty clear about my thoughts on that before. I love the idea of the townhomes here. I think that they're very well thought out, very well laid out. The streets, the trash, the bike locations, the outdoor amenities. I'm very impressed with the overall thoughtfulness of how this entire mini enclave will work within the community of the greater area and within its own sort of space and responsibility. So I would just like to say kudos for the design. It's very, very thoughtful. And on that, I would just say if there's any final questions from the applicant, if there's anything of concern, looks like I'm seeing heads shaking no. So I believe that that's all of our comments, and thank you very much for the presentation. There will be no vote today as this is simply a study session. So thank you for your time and application. Okay, with that, the action item number 2 is closed. So now we go to board member questions, comments, announcements, or future meetings and agenda items. Do we have anything from any of the board members? We do have a ARB event coming up, nighttime dinner. It's not a dinner, excuse me, snacks, nighttime snacks. So we do have that coming up. I believe everyone should have that on their calendars. And I think that that's something we're going to discuss with Jody afterwards. So if there's nothing else, we are officially adjourned. Oh, wait. You had that after the adjournment.
Oh,
Is that part of the board member questions, comments, announcements, or future meetings and agenda items?
Yes, that
Okay,
was
so-
supposed to be a presentation that we did today. It can be short or long, however we choose it to be.
Honestly, I am a little, let's see it. Okay. So let's go ahead and see it. I may need to step out personally. So I've got something pending that I may need to jump out for. However, I would absolutely say, let's go ahead and continue that. And if I do need to step out, board member Chen will be the official adjourner of this meeting. Take it away, Jody.
Okay, let me see if I can share here. There it is. Okay, so I had to use my ChatGPT skills and this is the picture that they came up with for ARB awards
That is
with buildings
delightful.
included in it. So just a fun piece there. So this is just, kicking off the ARB awards. I mean, no decisions today. Just want to start having you think about this in your minds. It will definitely take a couple of hearings for us to get to the conclusion of this, but you see in front of you the bylaws talking about every 5 years that we would do these design awards for outstanding projects. And the award-winning projects would be selected from those reviewed by the ARB and completed since the last awards were made. So we have always interpreted completed to be constructed, that they're done constructing, final inspection, those sorts of things. And so because of that, we do have some holdovers from last year because they weren't finished with construction. And so I have that list in a minute. The criteria, though, and the number of awards, that is completely up to the ARB and changes, every 5 years. But I will show you what we've done in the past so that you have some sense of things that have been done. And then winning projects are displayed at City Hall and with a presentation. We can also do a proclamation. And we had a whole, ceremony last time that was a lot of fun. So this is past years. So it looks like in 98, we had 5 awards. In 2005, we had 5 again. In 2010, they did 10 awards. And then in 2015, they did 5 awards. And then in what was meant to be 2020, but the pandemic sort of delayed that, so it didn't really happen until 2022. We ended up with 6 categories, 6 awards. And then at the last minute, we felt like there were 2 more projects that needed an honorable mention, and especially when we wanted to get a residential project in the mix. And so this was our previous awards. And then, as I was saying, there's about 18 projects that we would carry over that had been reviewed more than 5 years ago, but hadn't been fully constructed. So we would be considering those now. And then I have started the list, but of course we're in 2 different software systems, so it's going to be a little fun. But so far we're looking about 50 or so projects a year. Some of these are the same address, so they'll shrink down a little bit. But we'll have a good, 100, 200 projects to look at and start to whittle down that list for what we think are award-winning projects. And so going forward, just considering ways to involve the public, to involve ARB alumni if that's desired. Staff will continue to pull together the full list of eligible projects. And then once we do all of that, you would be deciding on ARB awards on the categories. And of course, we'll do that over several hearings. That'll take us a little bit of time. Then we would have a reception, a web page, and all those sorts of other fun things. So I think that's it. So any questions?
Is there such a thing as an ARB alumni?
I made that one up.
I can tell. Jennifer, you
think
should be aware
yes.
that Amy French took personal interest in the awards program, and she was extremely involved in the presentations and making sure it all got that done. Just so you know.
Just one question, Jody, in terms of like the target date, it would be like so according to the every 5 years, it'd be sometime next year would be
Correct.
the end of, I guess the awards would be presented sometime next year to keep the 5-year schedule. Is that correct?
Let me find one thing. The timing of the awards, again, is sort of more up to us. There had been some conversations about, there's an architecture month. And so did we want to have it then? But then I think AIA does some awards then. It's open. So.
Yeah, I'll just say we were on it last time and 2022 was super fun and we really had a good time with it. My only complaint about it is that it's sort of once every 5 years. And while I understand the need for that and staff's time and availability, my only complaint is that the turnover of the ARB, people can serve a 3-year term and then they'll never be participating in the ARB awards, which is just a delightful experience. So I would encourage everybody to serve more than one term, and B, that this is a fun event that is, I don't know, I just was very enjoyable. And I think it's really sort of showcasing the talent that we have in this city and sort of bringing to light that and highlighting these projects that may otherwise go unnoticed by the public at large. So I think that it's a really sort of special thing that we can do. David?
I just want to say that we exhibited the boards, in Rinconada and in, what's the main one on University?
In the lobby here at City Hall.
And then locally in the one that's here in town. And I have, actually, there were five boards, right? So 4 of them came back. One of them somehow got lost in Rinconada. I can't explain what happened because I think that somebody didn't tell me the full story. Somebody liked one of the projects and took it home or something like that. And I still have the 4 boards, so I should really be bringing them back. Are we going to keep them? Or Amy indicated that at some point she'd like to clear out the storage room and just get rid of.
I do think those would be helpful as examples for the next one, so that again, the board members who maybe weren't here when we did the award ceremony last time can see what it is that was produced.
Of course, I'll bring them back and
Yeah.
hand them off.
I do have the previous slide presentations that we showed at hearings here, but then the boards you're talking about were at the presentation that we did. And those were put together by the winning architects. So, but we did give them some parameters for sure.
And just, I think, hopefully final question. When will we sit down and sort of start working this out a little bit more formally? What's the goal for this?
I think if you can give me maybe a month, so if I come back, not the next hearing, but the one after, then we can have a full list of eligible projects.
Okay.
And we can start to whittle it down from there.
Great. And then in the meantime, I would encourage my fellow board members to think about potential categories, things like that. So we had some examples of last ones, and the concept that there's a residential one that sort of, we needed one. So maybe we do it by category. Maybe it's, just thinking about how you guys think this award ceremony should sort of serve our community and highlight, architectural buildings that really we do want to highlight and showcase, and how do we best achieve that? Okay, any other questions?
Can I make a plug for something? I've pushed this several times while I've been on the ARB, never to success, but that doesn't stop any of us. It seems. Why not expand this to do a residential category? And I know the reason is that it's not in the bylaws, et cetera. But if we want to get public interest and we want to do something that really jazzes everybody up, we could easily do residential design, the best house or most environmentally correct house, anything we like. And just say instead we take all the projects that went through the IR process or something like that. It would require us changing our bylaws, and it wasn't an easy process, but in the past, board members have not been for this. But I strongly think it's a good thing to do, to expand our interest, where our purview is matters of architectural interest to the city. Clearly, this would be one. Boards
That's actually
programs
really
promote
true
better
because,
design.
yeah, residential single family wouldn't be part of the list, right? Because they don't come to the ARB. But then kind of thinking through that further, as far as how projects get selected, it's, if I understand correctly, the applicants are not involved in like applying for the award. It's really like we look at what was submitted, what went through the ARB, and what got built. So in that sense, I think that's great. And, if they're winners, then they're informed and they can put their presentation on boards together. But then stretching that further to residential, I guess it would be kind of a similar, at least from Jody, your office side, like what's been submitted in terms of residential and what's been approved and what's been constructed. So that'd be a whole other list. And I don't have an opinion one way or the other on whether single family residential or even duplexes should be included in this, but we would then need to come up with a process of how that list gets made.
Of course, yeah, but there's very good records of it. It's all actually online. And I don't know if staff would have the bandwidth for it, but I don't know that it's that much more work. I think it's a change in the purview within our bylaws. So we would have to actually change that. I would support doing that. But all of us would have to want to do it, I think.
I think what we're landing on here is we might want to agendize this as an item for a future meeting. When maybe we've got a smaller project and it's the only one, maybe we'll find a time for an actual ARB discussion on this, because I do think there is a bit to plan out. And, talking about changing bylaws and things, I think that we definitely have some interest in that, but we might need to just dedicate a little bit of time to it, whether it's an hour at one of the ARB meetings or something like that. So, okay. Anything else? With that, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.